There's a lot to talk about when it comes to the weapons in Splatoon. Their competitive viability, their relative strength in Salmon Run, even their... wall paint! Although there's one aspect of these weapons that never seems to earn its own discussion altogether, and that's paint output. It's pretty well understood throughout the community which weapons make the best paint bots, and sorting through the rest of them should be a pretty easy thing to do. But if solo queue has taught me anything, it's this. That process is fraught with pitfalls and misunderstandings. Now I know what you're thinking. Mumph? Are you making a video hoping to convince people to stop picking bad weapons? You know that's never gonna work, right? And that everyone who goes out of their way to watch Splatoon videos already more or less knows what they're doing? And what you're doing now basically amounts to a drop in the bucket? Look, I know, there's nothing I can do to convince Johnny Aerospray to stop picking his favorite weapon. But the least I can do is help him understand why his weapon of choice isn't the end-all be-all when it comes to painting the map. But there's more to this than just teaching newer players right from wrong. What if you wanted to experiment with different painting weapons on your team comp? What exactly is it that makes a weapon that can paint into one that's actually worth using for that role? There's a couple ways to approach this problem, but before we make any genuine weapon-specific assertions, there's something really important that warrants discussion. I'll get straight to the point. This is a tier list that strictly tracks how much paint each weapon is capable of producing, and you may immediately notice some oddities. Many of these supposed higher tier weapons can't get themselves into positions where their paint can actually shine, much less survive the trip. Others have such low tempo to their paint output that flipping a zone can take ages, especially if the zone is being contested, which, let's be honest, it is.
Always!
There's also a few that can paint, but would really prefer to be slaying or skirmishing instead. When you consider aspects like these, it becomes apparent that paint output alone isn't enough to consistently outpaint the enemy team. There are more factors at play here. I tend to refer to this combination of factors as paint effectiveness, and before we go about defining it, let's take a look at how it impacts our tier list. So you don't have to squint, I'll just tell you what's changed. The spray shooters got what they deserved. Splatlings and Chargers now have their charge time properly represented, low-tempo weapons needed their slow paint speed taken into account, and weapons that would prefer not to paint have been put in positions that reflect that. This is an improvement for sure, but it's still not perfect. I don't think a Neo-Sploosh player will look at this and understand why someone out there thinks they're getting outpainted by blasters. In fact, I don't think a tier list can properly articulate this. Which is why today we're using a tier grid. That's right, I lied about the tier list. This is, well, let's be honest, it's a mess, but I do think it more accurately represents how the weapons rank against each other in terms of paint output and effectiveness. By the way, I think it's about time we attempt to define what exactly it is that makes paint effective. To me, paint effectiveness considers three things. Paint consistently placeable at low risk, paint placeable at high tempo, and paint placed efficiently through combat. Spray shooters like Neo-Sploosh and Gold Aerospray who lack consistent entry tools can't paint without exposing themselves to weapons that will outrange and out-DPS them. This means that the only paint they can safely place is in irrelevant positions your team already owns, like spawn or fringe corners of the map. As such, they tend to be ideal examples of weapons that fail to meet our first criteria for effective paint. Paint placeable consistently and at low risk. Tempo of paint output is another key element. Weapons like the Hydra and E-Liter may spend more time in any given match charging than they do painting, and while they both provide good amounts of paint when firing, the downtime offsets this tremendously. Alternatively, some weapons have very high paint output, but only over large amounts of time. Our poster boy here is the Bathtub, who can output absurd amounts of paint, but will never flip a zone being watched by a single Tri-Strike user. God forbid there are two. This is also where burst paint comes into play. Range Blaster may not be able to paint all that much, but with a single shot and a carefully placed bomb, it can flip a zone single-handedly and instantaneously. However, a bomb is a costly thing to use. If using your bomb will immediately force you to sit still in the ink for several seconds, it might not be worth the sacrifice. This is categorically a tempo issue, and weapons that need to make regular use of their bombs can struggle to compensate for all the time they spend refilling their ink tank. Lastly, we need to talk about paint placed through combat. The reason Explo, in my opinion, has the best paint effectiveness in the game ultimately comes down to this. Whether it's shooting the map or its enemies, Explo is always placing about 20 paint per shot. Many other weapons have to be incredibly decisive as to whether they should shoot at targets or the ground. The premier example of this is Pencil, whose cooler is so important that it can't always justify firing those amazing 68 damage shots at other players. This is one of the reasons why Red Pen is such a viable option, because now the Pencil can spend all 5 shots per charge wiping out the enemy team. How well your paint is placed through combat is the final piece towards defining paint effectiveness, and now that we understand it, it's about time we talked about the weapons individually. For my next trick, I'll be making all of these weapons disappear. We'll start with the weapons whose overall paint output is the lowest and work our way upwards. I should also probably note that I'll cover both kits for every weapon, and sometimes even multiple different weapons, at the same time, since that should make for a more digestible experience. This is a pretty long video, so just in case you're looking for something specific, I'll list the weapons and their timestamps in the description in whichever order they're covered. As the length of this video indicates, I'm about to talk at length about every weapon in the game, and I'm sorry. Up to this point, everything you've heard in this video has been scripted, but that ends now. So the rest of this video was done in one take. I hope you can forgive me for all the long pauses I'm about to take while I'm figuring out what I'm going to say, because, I mean, to script this next, like, many hours would just be, like, folly, really. So, the rest of this is just gonna be, like, pretty much entirely unedited off the cusp, because I feel, like, relatively confident that I can remember what needs to be said. Before we really dive deep into this, I just need to say, if I put your weapon, like, at the bottom, keep in mind it's not me saying your weapon's bad, it's just me saying that your weapon is not good for the role of support, or for painter, in any given team comp. I'm not saying it's bad, especially if you're a slayer. You're not gonna be good at painting. It's not your job. But let's get into this. From the very bottom, with Carbon Roller. So here's the deal. Given that I have to compare every single weapon in the game, in order to adequately do that, someone has to be at the bottom and someone has to be at the top, otherwise everything would be kind of crammed to the top right square here, all the way up in this. But that's not, it's, you know, you gotta make good comparisons. And the thing about Carbon Roller is if you're ignoring your kits, your only real approach option is Vertical Flick. And Vertical Flick is small, it doesn't paint a lot, it's not the best of tools. So, you really need a good kit if you want to approach. You could just, you know, spam your horizontal flick, but the thing about that is, when you're a weapon with very low range, and especially if you're a weapon who, like, prioritizes sharking to get your kills, it's not the best idea to run around the map mashing the trigger over and over again, and, like, basically sending a big alert to everyone on the enemy team, like, please splat me. That's not a good idea. So, you kinda need other tools if you're gonna paint a whole lot as a roller. And, unfortunately for V-Carbon, here are its tools. Autobomb. Normally, if you can't get in, you'll sit in the ink and either shark or you'll throw bombs. And the thing about the Autobomb is that it's cheap. It's a lethal bomb, but when you throw it, it takes so long for it to do anything of note, and it's so easy to avoid, too. It's a low-tempo sub, is the issue. So, you kinda need your special to do a lot of heavy lifting, if you're the Carbon Roller here, and you have a very cheap Zipcaster, which is great. It's fantastic. But as we discussed, to fill your special with this weapon, you have to expose yourself to the enemy team. It's just a very vulnerable weapon. And when you're slaying, you know, you're playing the weapon correctly, you are sharking, you're not doing a lot of painting. Every once in a while you pop out, you pull the trigger, enemy is splatted, you go back into the ink and you shark for a while. Maybe throw a bomb or two. So you're not placing a lot of ink through combat. And because you have no range, it's just a big risk to do anything. And that's where Carbon Deco comes in. Because Carbon Deco, the entire kit makes up for that. If someone outside of your range, but you still need to do something, Burst Bomb, it's great. It can paint the ground, give you a way out if you're surrounded by enemy ink. It can chip someone, which actually works for this weapon's combo, which is pretty great. And it can contribute to team fights. It can do a lot. It's a good entry tool, if nothing else. And at the end of the day, you still have a Zuka. And the one thing we haven't really discussed yet is that the best way to ensure that the enemy team is not painting over your paint and making sure that your team has control of the map's paint is to keep the enemy from even being alive. Zuka is fantastic for that. It stops the enemies from painting, it stops them from getting close to you. It does a lot for the Carbon Roller and its team. Even so, especially if you're playing the kit correctly and you're using, burst bombs every once in a while, Zukas when you can, you're not gonna want to expose yourself to danger too often. If you do, you're not gonna get your Zuka. And you're not gonna get your shark kills either, are you? So it doesn't place a lot of paint in combat, obviously, and it's a little higher tempo than V-Carbon. Its kit just does so much for it, and it's still, granted, a really low-ranged weapon, but that kit, man, it does so much. You really can, even with a weapon like this, run around the map just painting with your horizontal, given that no one's, sniping. But the question is, should you? Yeah, you can get 1,000 plus paint at the end of the match, sure. Should you? I feel like you'd be better off slaying with a weapon like this, focusing on something your weapon's actually good at. But that's I guess that's just a part of this list, and we're gonna hear that kind of dialogue again as we get to some of the other weapons in the game. So let's move on to the next roller. Everything that applies to V-Carbon applies to Krakon as well. It has no approach, but this time it doesn't even have Autobomb. Autobomb is not a great entry tool, especially in terms of tempo. Beacon is not an entry tool. Beacon, you can use it for repositioning, it's cool. And the thing about Kraken is that you use your Kraken, you can't paint the map for 10 seconds. So you better be getting a lot of value out of that Kraken. And you're a sharking weapon, too, so, making it very obvious where you are because you're a big Kraken on the map is not particularly good for your survivability. But there is a reason that I still do think that, even Krakon Roller with its kit that's actually, actively making it more difficult for you to paint, I think there's a reason that it's up here, above, or in front of V-Carbon. And that's just the main weapon. A horizontal flick on Krakon, on Splat Roller in general, is a completely different ballgame. It's really, really good. Vertical flick too. You get a lot more range, you get a lot more paint. And considering, especially for this kit, that those are your only painting options, you're not the... No, you're pretty bad, aren't you? I was gonna say, you're not the worst weapon when it comes to paint output. But it's still a struggle. It's really easy to rush you down, if the enemy has even a slight bit of range. You're fighting like a vanilla blaster, you're not gonna make it out alive. But it's kind of crazy to me, because with all those tools, yeah, Crack-On's down here. How is Splat Roller all the way up here? It's the kit. Curling Bomb is amazing for Roller. It's an entry tool. It's an entry tool that you can, like, feign approaches with, too. It's still a lethal bomb, albeit not one you're really going to be using for its lethality. But that is a really, really good thing for moving around the map and keeping yourself, what's the word? Safe? Invisible? You can basically move, approach, and stay sharking in ink that was not your ink a second ago. It's really, really good. Just Curling Bomb by itself. It's the perfect sub for any roller. And then there's Bubble. If you were having a hard time, like, staying alive to make sure you could keep, you know, painting the map and slaying the enemies, Bubble is phenomenal. Suddenly, no one can stop you. You're free to just, like, paint and swing the thing over and over again. And Bubble does a couple things for paint effectiveness that are worth noting. When you're in the bubble, you basically have an extra 5 feet forward that you can safely move. So that expands your effective range, which is really, really nice. Especially for weapons that already have a decent range value. But for the big one-shot roller, it's not bad at all. And Bubble keeps you alive, especially when you're this weapon who can insta, like, 180, push one button, enemy is dead. Especially for a weapon like that, the Bubble's a very, very good tool for your sustain. Unfortunately, it still kind of fails to place a lot of paint through combat, but having a Bubble and the paint that you do have on your horizontal flick means that, like, if your roller sets up a bubble right next to the zone and just starts spamming horizontals, it's gonna be really difficult for the enemy team to consistently keep it their color. So it's not bad at all. But back down here, we have the H3. Look, I know, like 1 or 2 people are gonna watch this and be like, what are you talking about? The H3 is great, it can paint. Look at it go. You gotta listen to me on this, okay? In ideal conditions, like say you're on a flat map with no obstacles, you will have dozens of opportunities to pull the trigger and slightly flick your controller to the left or right, to spread out the paint of your burst in such a way that it's kind of an impressive amount. But the thing is, the maps on Splatoon 3 are very dense, and they're not going to give you opportunities to do that too often. So those instances are going to be few and far between. And then you get to the vanilla H3 kit, one of the only cooler weapons in the game, and it has a point sensor and a weapon that's incredibly unwieldy and very, very hard to defend yourself with if you're rushed down. So because of how easy it is to rush down VH3, it's got very, very little sustain. And of course, the rate of fire and the rate of its paint output is incredibly low tempo. And that is coupled with, like, the shots. I mentioned how if you flick to the left or right while you're shooting, you can get a good bit of paint on the floor per burst. When you're firing at enemies, you're firing in a straight line at them. You're going to create a line that you can swim through to them. That's good for movement. It's not good for painting the map. So VH3 kind of struggles. And despite having a kit that is much, much better in every regard, H3D has very, very similar problems. It's a setup weapon. You put up the wall, you put up the bubble, you're safe. You're not going to get rushed down. You're alright, you know? It expands the range you can safely, like, impact the world around you from. It's good. It's still a very slow weapon. It doesn't get a lot of paint. And unless you're hitting those, like, 180 trigger insta-kills, like, you're not going to get a lot done with the weapon, especially in terms of paint output. You need to be like the dude himself in order to get anything done with H3D. It's a bit of a struggle weapon, and I debated genuinely over the past month or so for hours on, like, with a kit that good, is it really all the way down here? And I just think being stapled to the main weapon and its lackluster paint, I really do think that's the case. And like, before we move on, I mentioned that it's really easy to get rushed down with H3. That's a risky... It's a risky thing to be, these weapons. It's very risky. So when you're trying to get forward and paint, you know, more paint in the enemy turf, you're exposing yourself to danger. That's not a good recipe for success in terms of paint effectiveness. Moving on. Recycled. Recycled Brella. Would you believe me if I told you that, like, when I started drafting this a month or two ago, this weapon was at the very bottom, all the way down here? Below Carbon Deco, it was all the way down here. I don't think I have to explain why, but I'm going to anyways. The buff that it got to its shot. It's not crazy, it doesn't do, like, insane paint, but it does good paint. It's a very, very good amount of paint per shot. It's still at, like, a straight line that's relatively thin in the grand scheme of things. But it's solid paint. And the reason the weapon, like, struggles so much with, like, paint output and consistency is that shield, especially until recently, it has been your best painting tool. That shield is really easy to shred. I don't have to tell you this, you know. That shield's really, really easy to shred. You can just, like, insta-delete that thing. They gave it a faster recharge, which is good, but you can still instantly delete the next one, too. So it's really risky to move up with this weapon. But considering that your main weapon now paints a good bit, firing a couple times, then launching the shield, like rinsing and repeating for 30 seconds, you're not gonna put out a bad amount of paint. You're gonna do pretty good. But with a weapon that still does struggle to put out so much paint, it needs the kits to be really, really good. And that's the issue. The Splashdown kit, we all love Toxic Mist Splashdown. It's very fun, it's very cool, it's a good combo, we like it. Toxic Mist doesn't paint. Splashdown allegedly paints if, you know, the enemy team doesn't shoot down you and your fists. It can paint a decent amount, especially after its more recent buff. It can paint. It's not a painting tool. Don't use your splashdowns for painting. It can do so much more. You can insta-shred a bubble. You can defend yourself if the situation gets rough. It's a decent special. It's not a painting special. It confuses me that they keep buffing its paint, but forget about that. Now you know why I think Mark II is a little lower. But the reason that I think Mark I is so much higher, and by so much, I know, it's just like, that's the gap, that's so much to me. You know what I mean. The bubble is great for sustain. It's not fantastic, because it's still not a painting tool on its own. It just gives your main weapon more opportunities to do its painting. And then Dart. Dart is bad. We all know this. No one is hearing that for the first time right now. We all know Dart is bad at most things. It's a nice way to just, like, scare people, you know? Someone's getting a little too close to you, but they're still far enough away that they can outrange you. Sneeze at them a little bit. Maybe they'll, like, hide behind cover for a second. You'll buy yourself some time. You could throw it at the ground, get yourself a little bit of movement in enemy ink. And it combos. That's good for sustain. Easier access to your kill, like, that's good. It's not a terrible kit, all things considered. But it's not a good kit for painting, is the thing. Every weapon in the game that isn't currently on the screen is better at painting than this. So, you know, it's not gonna be all that good. It's decent. Which is good to know that, like, even going from V carbon up 2 little grid marks, we've had quite the improvement. But what's next? Blasters. I don't have to tell you why V Rapid Pro is all the way down there, but I'm going to anyways. So, Poison Mist, Toxic Mist. It's expensive. It's not a very cheap sub. This weapon is not, like, remarkably ink efficient. So that's not a good combo. And then, this is our first time talking about vacuum, which literally disables your gun for about 10 seconds, especially if the enemy is like, no, I'm not gonna shoot that, are you kidding me? You're gonna be locked in that, like, awful Luigi's Mansion animation for way too long, and then you get to shoot a tiny orb, and then your ink tank is refilled and you can play the game again. That is never a great thing for paint effectiveness. It's a tempo issue. It is a horrible, horrible tempo issue. Vacuum is a struggle special, and very few weapons that have vacuum are going to be making it past, like, this line. In fact, I doubt it. I doubt a single one does. On the other hand, Rapid Prodeco. This weapon, instead of getting an ink tank refill delayed for 10 seconds, it gets it instantly with Killer Whale. And the shots on these two weapons are not particularly bad for painting. It's like a great value snipe rifle. I haven't talked about this yet, but when a blaster shoots, it does more paint if the shot is closer to the ground, which is really, really nice for if you just need to paint the ground for a little bit. But if you're shooting at targets, you're not really going to be optimizing your paint too well. You're gonna, you're gonna be doing the blaster thing. It's a slaying weapon. All the blasters are at the end of the day. But Prodeco's instant ink tank refill, combined with the chip damage that Killer Whale can do, and the dart, which also can chip, either of those sets you up for an easy one-shot if they're hit. That is great for sustain. It's really good for sustain. The instant ink tank refill is good for tempo. It doesn't paint the best amount during combat, but it's enough to get by, you know? Like, when you shoot with this thing, you have a clean line to move with. That's nice. It's real nice stuff. The vanilla rapid and the regular rapid deco, I do not typically have such a high opinion of V Rapid, but lately I'm kind of coming around on it. It's not bad at all, really. I mean, the kit is very susceptible to being rushed down, which is why, like, ink mines are really good for it. It keeps you alive a little bit longer. But if someone, catches you out, and you're the V Rapid, it's very easy for you to just, disappear. And your special doesn't do anything to help that. Granted, it's still Tri-Strikes. Tri-Strikes are amazing for pretty much everything. But you might find yourself getting rushed whenever you pop it. It can be a bit of a struggle, being a V Rapid player. We still like it, though. It's still, like, the fire rate being cranked up. It's got more paint than the Rapid Pro, unless you count distance. Which is why they're so interchangeable, and it's kind of why these two are pretty much the exact same in terms of paint effectiveness to me. Despite range usually being something that makes for more effective paint, it's kind of comparable what they can do. Especially when you consider the kit of Rapid Deco, not Rapid Pro Deco. Rapid Deco. I've been calling Rapid Pro Deco for my whole, time playing the game. So I have a hard time calling it the Rapid Pro Deco. I've been doing that for this video, just for you. Torpedo. Torpedo is the answer. Torpedo can paint one hell of a lot if the enemy doesn't shoot it down. So, you see a Charger, you see a Splatling, you see an Explo, throw it. Force them to do, an annoying skill shot or waste their entire charge meter. It's good for that. If you can't get a lock on by throwing it up in the air, a rolled torpedo still paints. It's an approach option, and it sets you up for combos. It's pretty good. I gotta say, it's not a bad kit at all. The only, weaker aspect to this weapon, we discussed paint placed through combat not being so good, but the tempo here is insane. And when you can shoot, when you can hold the trigger and walk, forward diagonally, with the rate that this thing fires at, you're gonna make a pretty solid block of paint to move around in. And to, flip a zone if you need to, if you're not under fire, It's not bad for that. Inkjet? How do you even describe Inkjet here? it's a 50-50 kind of thing, because on one hand, it paints. It paints under you, it paints wherever you shoot, but when you're using inkjet well, your priority isn't painting, it's hitting the enemies. And if you hit the enemies, they explode and leave a bunch of paint. If you miss them, you better hope that your shot hit the ground so that something is at least coming out of your miss. But it's still inkjet, so you're locked out of using your main weapon and your sub for a bit. And you're just kind of praying that no snipers are looking at you. That no blasters are like in the general area. You're just kind of hoping. So it can go really badly, or it can be decent for sustain and keeping the pressure up. It's not bad at all. It's got pretty effective paint output, I would say. Although it's still a blaster, so its overall output can't be very high. Next. Other blasters. Regular blaster and range blaster. So here's the deal. We might as well talk about the regular blasters first. They have less range than the range blaster. It's in the name, you know this. Unfortunately, a custom blaster over here, he kinda struggles a little bit for the same reasons that Bamboo Mark II does. Bamboo Mark II? Recycled Bamboo. Bambrella Mark II, whatever you want to call that thing. Point sensor is great if you're an opening gambit user. Splashdown does not paint. Point sensor does not paint. The blaster itself has a low fire rate. Granted, it's I think compared to every other blaster you shoot, you're the fastest to get into your ink afterwards. So it's got a decent rate of fire, just not enough that you're going to be making any paint happen. And its kit is not helping, so it can struggle a little bit. The vanilla blaster, on the other hand, Autobomb. Autobomb's not great for tempo, but when you're not able to put like any paint up on the map, it's something, you know? And when you combine that with Bubble, and a weapon that's really, really good at fighting in the mid-range, you get a lot more sustain. It is like, the thing about these blasters is they're not placing great paint in terms of numbers through their combat. But what they are doing, when they hit somebody especially, is they're painting under their feet. Which is the most useful paint of all. It leads to kills. It's great. Still not much paint output, but it's great. And because the time to get into the ink is so quick, your tempo is great too. Bubble, obviously, that's sustain. It's extra range. It's more everything with which to impact the world around you. It's a pretty goddamn good kit. I like it. I like it quite a lot. Range blaster, on the other hand. The tempo's a lot lower. But the kits. Okay, I know I said but the kits, but the subs. Bombs are expensive. Very expensive for a weapon that only gets like 1 to 2 shots after using it. They're great. There's a reason I used it as my ideal example of burst paint earlier. You can do so much in the blink of an eye if you set up a bomb at the correct time and a shot very well placed. The issue with these two weapons, a lot of what applied to the other two blasters applies here. But it's the specials. There's no getting around it really. Kraken stops you from playing the game for a little bit. And when you're a blaster, that's like more impactful than it is for any other Kraken weapon in the game. You want your blaster to be blasting. If they're not blasting, why do you have a blaster on your team? Especially if that's going to last as long as a Kraken does. It's kind of worth it in some instances for the regular Splat Bomb, which is, in my opinion, better than Suction for its versatility. But the Suction is still really, really good. It's more paint output, and the biggest reason why I think vanilla range is above custom range, Kraken is a pain, yes. Wavebreaker is an instant ink tank refill. You get slightly more use out of your blaster, which means slightly more paint on the map. It's still not a painting weapon, it's a slayer through and through. But it's earned its place, I think, this high up, which is not high up at all, but still. Especially relative to the other blasters, it's kind of the best choice. If you want a weapon You need a weapon that at least can paint a little bit for your slaying roll. Up next, the leaders. Alright. This warrants some explanation. That much is certain. Range is great. You know this. I know this. Range is really, really good. And for paint effectiveness, it's in part the name of the game. How far you can impact the world around you in terms of paint. That just means you have more area that you can consistently place paint in without, you know, risking your life. That's a good thing to have. But we talked about this in the tempo section. They're really, really slow. The charge time is very, very long. They paint a great line when they shoot. That's very nice for your team. But then there's the issue of, okay, if you're painting on the ground, you can choose a good line. If you're shooting a target, though, you might be making some pretty useless paint on the floor that your team can't really use for anything. So that's paint placed through combat at, like, rock bottom. The thing is, it's still got a lot of range. So even having, like, low tempo and bad paint placed through combat isn't enough to, like, sink it particularly far, because it can just paint so much without risking itself. The issue for these that, like, I think E-Leader could be higher if it just had a kit, you know? Oh god, if only. Like, custom leader? C-Leader? Good lord. This poor thing. This poor thing! Beacons aren't bad if you're a backline, because it lets you shuffle positions. If you're getting pushed on one, you can just switch to another. That's pretty cool. It requires a bit of setup, and the other team can kind of just take them out if they find the position to do so. But the reason this kit's horrible, it doesn't have a sub for combat, yes. The Kraken. Good lord. The last weapon you want on your team to stop playing the game and to rush to the middle of the fray is your backline. What an awful idea. I swear, every time I see a C-Leader pop Kraken, their rate of survival is like 10%. Unless they're just, you know, using it in the last 5 seconds of the map to cheese an objective. That's the best they got. It's really risky. And it doesn't help your team in terms of, like, really anything while you're in the Kraken other than objective play. It's a struggle. V-Leader is literally, like, several places above it for good reason, despite having a kit that, like, for most of the game's life has been seen as, like, laughable. We all know that ink mines are good. We know this. And we all know that Wavebreaker is bad. Is that enough said? I think pretty much. This is one of the only weapons where Wavebreaker is, like, at least now that it can locate enemies. Wavebreaker's not so bad on Leader. Telling you where people are when you have an insta-death laser? Great. Getting the instant ink tank refill, also great for your tempo, and that's a nice crutch for a weapon that really struggles with its tempo. So it's not particularly terrible, but it's still, like, the other problems that we mentioned so far. It can struggle. And especially if the rest of your team is bad, you're just gonna get rushed down, you're gonna get nothing done. It can struggle. It's not the weapon you pick for paint output. You pick it for other reasons. What's next is the entirely, like, different chargers. Look at these two. How'd they get so far apart? How'd they do that? Vanilla Charger? Vacuum. Boo. Horrible. Tempo issue? Stop playing the game for 10 seconds? Not great. You still have a Splat Bomb, and your charge time is like a second. It's pretty good. You can just output shot after shot after shot, and get a lot of paint on the floor. Especially if you're actually good at hitting your shots, you're just gonna be outputting the kills like crazy. And Splat Bomb is a great get off me, it defends you, it makes it a little more consistent to place your weapon. So the tempo isn't the issue here. The consistency isn't the issue here. The paint placed through combat is the same as the Leader. So that's not really the issue, it's the kit, it's the vacuum. It's single-handedly the vacuum. It's kind of crazy. Which is why ZF, all the way up there, look at him, look at him, look at his marvelous kit. A wall, perfect for sustain. You can now fight snipers that are better than you, because you can hide behind a wall. That's great. Strikes, with the with the amount of paint that this thing outputs, strikes are fantastic. You get them enough. It's one of, I think it's the best backline option. I think it might even be the only backline option with strikes. One way or another, it's really good for strikes. It really, really is. There's not really much more to say though. It's got everything that V Splat Charger does not. It's a good weapon, and I think because like the combination of strikes for extra range, sustain, and paint output, wall for extra sustain, and the range of the charger and the speed of the charger, I think that's why it's the highest up weapon we've seen so far. It's not bad at all. There's a reason why, like, whenever pencil, I tried to say pen and pencil at the same time. That was awful. Whenever pen gets banned, this thing rises to the top. There's a reason for that. Alright, what's next? Lunas. So, you might be surprised. A weapon with this low range, being all the way, you know, up here, in terms of paint effectiveness, that is a little shocking. I once saw a Luna Blaster Neo get 1700 paint in a single round of Turf War. I don't know what to believe anymore, frankly. That was before the Fizzy nerf, thank God. It can't do that anymore. That was terrifying. But the reason it's all the way up here, the kits are really fantastic. Especially now that Ultra Stamp is good too. It's just great kits! Let's talk about the first one first. Actually, you know what? The main weapon as well. It doesn't paint very far in front of it, but when it does shoot, it paints a good blotch. It doesn't paint a line like other blasters do, but it paints an amount that you can then run through. Like some sort of a gimped dread ringer, you know? It's a good V of paint that you can use. I like it. I like it quite a bit. And that's not even to mention how, like, quick the shots come out, one after another. You can just kind of obliterate someone with this thing, if you get too close. But that's another thing, that's the reason it's not too much higher. Getting close with this thing isn't an easy thing to do, and having to get close to, you know, make use of your weapon is a risky thing to do. Which is why it's really good that the kits are insane. Splat Bomb. Insta-kill. Incredibly versatile. It paints a little bit. But, like, it's good for everything. The Splat Bomb, it's just really, really good for everything. It's not enough to, like, put you up too much, but still. Combine that with Zipcaster, you've got a weapon that, like, say you're in Turf War. Zip to the back of the map, just start painting the, like, awful corners of the map that no one wants to go to. Wonderful. Say there's a sniper harassing your team. Zip him. It's over. You're the best weapon once you have zipped to a location to annihilate everything in that location. It's really good for that. But being a strong weapon doesn't mean, like, great paint output or great paint effectiveness. It's just got alright paint effectiveness. Because all the parts of the kit, and the weapon itself, it's not bad at painting. It just doesn't really have anything particularly notable to bring to the table. The other one, the 1700 Neo Luna over here. Fizzy Spam. This is a weapon that doesn't need too much gear. It's got gear freedom, which means you can run double Fizzy all game if you have the chunks for it. Hammer is great now. You could just kind of throw it. I'm seeing people say that Hammer might even be better than Killer Whale at the moment, which is insane to even think about. But it paints a good bit. It one-shots. Fizzy paints one hell of a lot. And you can throw it to make a great line to move through. Granted, you're still a Luna Blaster, so you can't get away from this thing too much, you know? But the kit really does do a lot. What more is there to say? The tempo's great. The paint plays through combat. You're basically you're basically placing the same amount of paint whether you're shooting at an enemy or shooting at the ground. It's good. Alright, up next. S-Blast. So, I think now we've talked about every relevant blaster. Sorry, Clash, we'll get to you. But the S-Blasts, despite being slower than any of these guys, not the Rapids, we don't talk about those. Despite being slower than Luna, V-Blaster, Custom Blaster, Range Blaster, despite being the slowest, it still easily gets the paint output and effectiveness bonus over them. This one can struggle a little bit. I mean, what... Do you need me to tell you what the S-Blast does? It does a lot of paint in the short-ranged mode. It doesn't do a lot of paint in the long-ranged mode, but it's still a line that you can move through, yes. The kit for this thing is a lot of paint. And I thought about moving it up here. Because it doesn't have the tools that this thing has to do, you know, effective paint things. But the thing is, like, Sprinkler Reef Slider? That's a lot of paint. It's not crazy, but especially if your weapon can't paint all that much on its own, that's a lot of paint. It's still a Reef Slider and a Sprinkler, so one of them is exposing you to danger and obliterating you, the other is not helping you with combat whatsoever. But still, they can paint quite a bit. The issue, I guess, if you had to pick one, the tempo? It's not particularly great. But let's move on, because it can do a lot. And from the safety of the big range of the grounded shot. This guy. There's a reason this guy is becoming insanely popular as Blast 91. Its kit is genuinely one of the best in the game. And that kit combos with the main weapon phenomenally. If you outfit your gear correctly, you can just throw 2 burst bombs and then spam shots. 3 of them, I think. I think you just need like 3 ticks of Sub-Saber for that. But seriously, that is incredibly useful. 2 burst bombs will always do at least 50 damage if they both connect to some degree. That's a great combo, and as we discussed, a combo is a good way to keep the enemy from painting the map. So it's a net positive for your paint output. On top of that, burst bombs do paint a lot. Not a lot, like, I think, if I remember the number, it's like 14 paint. Which isn't, like, crazy, but it's enough to do a lot of things. You can stop someone from moving if you paint their feet with it. You can give you a bunch of movement. Give yourself a bunch of movement by throwing it at the ground. It's really good for a lot of things. And then there's Booyah Bomb. Booyah Bomb is a little bit insane when it comes to paint output, and it's almost the main reason why this guy is on the same tier as Vanilla S-Blast in terms of paint output. Booyah Bomb does like 100 points of paint. You don't get a lot of them, and it can be painted over if the enemy team is concentrating on firing over it. But that's a good amount of paint. You can just throw that wherever and get a ton, get big numbers. And because, you know, there's one thing I haven't discussed with this weapon in general. Because it's good at mid-range, and even better at short range, it's really easy to keep yourself alive, to get more sustain, to get more time to paint and affect the map. It's a good weapon, it really is. And it's kind of crazy that, like, it's a Slayer and it's all the way up here. There are not a lot of weapons that can do that kind of thing. So let's move on. Oh no. The Squiffer! Oh, poor Squiffer. We all love Squiffer. We all do, it's true. Everyone has to love Squiffer. It's cool, you can do trick shots. What's not to love? For the longest time, the only thing anyone wanted was for Squiffer to get a good kit. And when it got its new kit, people switched back to using the old one because they buffed Bubble in like a crazy way. So let's talk about the vanilla kit first and why I think they're in the exact same spot, no matter how you look at it. Bubble, like we discussed, is great for sustain. And when you're a weapon that has an insta-kill with a decent bit of range, that's really good. As long as you can, you know, keep yourself alive if someone contests your bubble, that's a really good thing to have. A point sensor? Not so much. It doesn't paint, but at the very least, with a weapon that's as high-paced as this, it can be nice to know where you're gonna aim before you've started charging your shot. That's the thing, out of all the snipers, this one... Snipers? I call them snipers, they come from TF2, you're gonna have to live with that. Of all the snipers, this one charges the fastest, this is common knowledge. It also moves the best. So, it's not bad in terms of tempo. It's not bad in terms of mobility. And the main shot itself isn't horrible. A nice mid-ranged, clean line to travel in. The problem is it doesn't come together to form a package that is, like, good at painting. It's the weapon that either you are hitting all your shots, picking the perfect positions and wiping out the enemy team, or you're not contributing whatsoever. It's one of the weapons that you'll see a top player in solo queue be like, why is there a Squiffer on my team? And it's not alone. New Squiffer? I almost called it Neo Squiffer just now. But New Squiffer is the kit that everybody wanted. Autobomb is great because you can just throw a lethal bomb and not think about it. And it'll maybe even find someone to get. It won't paint a lot. But it will go out there, it'll do its job. And that's kind of what you want when you want your focus to be, like, jumping around the map, doing, like, Spider-Man jumps, and doing a 360 shot on people. That's kind of what you want as a sub you can forget about. And it's an awesome kit. What it can do is incredible. But what it can't do is a lot more notable, unfortunately. It can't paint the map, it can't keep itself alive. It's a bit of a struggler. But we love it anyways. Alright, what's next? Goober. Oh. I actually hate to see it all the way up here, but I couldn't do it any other way. It's the Neo Luna kit. It's the exact same kit. And that kit alone can paint a ton, and Goober's tap shots are not bad at all when it comes to paint. Every time I end up playing this thing in, like, Salmon Run, because I'm never gonna pick it on my own, obviously, I'm kind of amazed by just how much paint that outputs. It really is just kind of impressive how much that tap shot does. The issue is, like, great kits aside, the charge time and the range. That's low tempo and low sustain. It's a bit of a struggle. And I don't think it's, like, neat gimmick of having a longer charge hold. I don't think that's helping it too much. The other one's kit, though, there's a reason it's all the way up here. Like, all the way over here, there's a reason. You know the reason. Torpedo is great. We know this. Missiles? We've not talked about missiles yet. Missiles do it all. It goes without saying that there's a cooldown on missiles, which is not great for tempo. But if you target a bunch of players with missiles, odds are one person is gonna get hit by the missiles that were targeted for somebody else. That's the only way that missiles, like, get good players. Because you can't really control what your teammates are doing in terms of micro movement when there's missiles on them. And that, you know, that does a lot for preventing the enemy from painting the map, which is... What would you even call that? Like, negative paint for the enemy team? It's a good quality to have, yeah. But they also paint a lot. So, like, in Turf War especially, I can't count how many times, like, someone has just popped missiles at the last second and launched 10 of them at the same guy standing in spawn, and won the game because of it. It's hilarious. I love that. But there's not really much more to say about it than, like, Missiles do a lot of painting, they locate your targets, which is good for sustain, and they take out people every once in a while, which is also good for negative paint, which is I think what we're going to be calling that from here on. It's just a shame that the weapon they're tied to is really, really bad in terms of paint placed through combat, in terms of actual effectiveness at playing the game, and in terms of tempo. The main weapon really is what holds Goober back. And I'm one of the people who would just love to see it reworked into something completely different. Sorry to, like, I don't know, who likes this weapon? Trash Panda? Sorry, Trash Panda. Clash Blaster. So, granted, this is the highest in terms of paint output that we've talked about so far. Chump and Curling Bomb. We talked about how Curling Bomb was a great entry tool. But it's also not bad for paint, at all. Like, even on weapons like Heavy Edit, who can already paint a ton, you might see them just throwing out a Curling Bomb to get the extra paint towards their special so they don't have to think about it. It does good paint, and Chumps, I think it's, if I remember the numbers correctly, 80 paint when they land, and another 60 when they explode. That's not bad. The problem is they're not always gonna explode. In fact, I think it's pretty rare that there's not at least one weapon on the team that can shoot them all down. But still, that kit on Neo Clash is not bad in terms of paint output. But it's held back by being on the Clash Blaster, which we need to talk about. Oh, Clash Blaster. It's so easy for people to think this weapon's really good. It's so easy for it. If you just turn on your brain a little bit, and pick the positions where the Clash cannot ambush you, try to keep track of where the Clash is, he will never kill you. Ever. It is so difficult to land kills in this weapon, that the only, so much that the only kills you do get are on unaware players, or players who just aren't very good at the game. So, if you're getting a kill with a Clash Blaster, it's a kill you'd be getting anyways. The Clash Blaster isn't doing the work for you there. And it does not paint. Good lord, it does not paint. It makes me so sad. I've always wanted a blaster that can paint a bunch. And Rapid Fire Blaster is the exact thing you need to accomplish that. This just doesn't do it. At all. It puts sparse paint on the ground, and its fire rate, while it's decent, it's not fast enough to, actually put a good amount on the paint. Amount of paint on the ground in a reasonable amount of time. And when it comes to stopping the enemies, good lord is it bad. If you're fighting, a good half of the weapons in this game, and you get the drop on them, they don't even know where you are until you're firing. They can react and out-DPS you before you've gotten your third shot out. It's a struggle weapon. And that's kind of what's unfortunate about it. This kit paints a lot, yes. It does not kill a lot. This kit, specifically the kit, not the weapon, kills a lot. But it doesn't really paint a lot. Zuka, I'm gonna bring up negative paint again. I think that's the term we're, coming up with on the spot. Zuka is the, premier negative paint tool, stopping your enemy from painting. It's great for that, it really is. And Splat Bomb is, I still think it's the most versatile sub in the game. Even though Torpedo and Fizzy exist, Splat Bomb's lethal damage and combo damage, it really is just insane what that thing can do. But putting two of the best pieces on the kit of any weapon does not make that weapon and its kit good. It just makes the kit itself, alone, a good kit. The weapon, not so much. There's not really anything else to say about Clash Blaster, so let's move on. That's a lot of buckets. Look at all those buckets. Wow. We're gonna talk about Bucket, Bucket Deco, Tri Nouveau, and Machine Neo at the exact same time. For a reason. They all paint extremely similarly to each other. Pull trigger, get a blotch of paint on the floor, do it again. That's it. The cool thing about these weapons is that, usually when you pull the trigger, you get a nice line to move around in. Tri is a little different because the shot is wider, so you get a blotch to move around in, which is solid. I wish the paint were a little better so that you could actually farm your cooler, which it still hurts that the special, like, costs so much for trying to VO. It's really, really unfortunate. But Machine and Slosher have almost identical paint values, and the only real difference maker is the time, the tempo. Machine is the slowest when it comes to shooting, the Slosher's in the middle, and then Tri. Tri can just mash its button, but it can't really affect too much of an area out of its range without needing a kit to do that. Ah, God, how do I even say this? These weapons aren't the fastest, and they don't have great paint on their own, which is why the kits that don't paint between the three are all so low. Like, okay, ignoring these three for a second because they have other reasons that they can paint. V-Tri, Bucket Deco, Machine Neo. Just... how do I even say this? When your only painting tool to fill your special is the shot that you get by pulling the trigger, on these weapons, it can be a real struggle. Especially for Machine, whose paint... it's not a lot. It's the lowest of the three per shot. At least it's got range, which is why it's out here above this thing, and the projectile is useful for doing other things besides painting, like the negative paint thing again. But good lord, solo queuing with Neo Machine, it makes you feel it. It makes you feel how little control you have over the paint in the map. The best you can do is paint a straight line and swim. That's it. If you need to paint a zone in your Neo Machine, you need to defeat all the enemies before you can paint the zone. It's really, really bad for that. And unfortunately, Bucket Deco doesn't fare much better with its main shot. We'll get to the kits in a second, but... oh god. You might think that Bucket paints a good bit, and there are ways to make it paint slightly better than just holding diagonally forward and pulling the trigger over and over again. There are, like, some techniques you can use, but it's not that much paint per shot. At all. What more is there to say? Other than, like, if only Tri painted a little more with its shot, it could probably see a bit more use. If Tri's paint, for the entire, like, blotch that Tri painted, was the same thickness as Luna's, it might even be up one or two. But these kits, good lord, these kits. Point sensor, no paint. Poison mist, toxic mist, no paint. Dart, it's something, but it's not good for paint. Zuka, amazing for slaying and negative paint, not good for paint. What is this? Jetpack? Oh god, this thing doesn't paint enough on its own to warrant it being a jetpack user, and the jetpack doesn't do all that much for it, so unless you're like the king of jetpack, you're not gonna get much done with V-Tri. Zipcaster Bucket is awesome, and we love it. Everything the Zipcaster Bucket can do is so cool. But not having this kit is the reason that you will never see this in any tournament, ever. It's just like, tri-strikes, shred a bubble, paint the map, flip the zone single-handedly. Bomb? Amazing. It's seriously an incredible kit. It's all the way up here. Despite having the same main weapon as Bucket Deco, it can do so much with that kit. I wouldn't want to say it's carried by the kit, because the main weapon still is really, really good in terms of, tempo. It's a fast weapon, despite having, like... it takes it a long time to make a bunch of paint on the floor. It doesn't take it a long time to destroy its enemies, so... negative paint, you know? It can stop the enemies from painting more successfully than most weapons in the game. And because it can, like, shoot around walls, over walls, around obstacles, I think is what I was trying to say. It just has a lot more that it can do consistently without exposing itself to danger. And then of course, even though it doesn't place a lot of paint when it fires, the difference between like you're shooting at the ground and you're shooting at a target with this weapon is not substantial at all. So your paint placed through combat is pretty good. So it's all the way up here. It really earns its spot here. And as you see what other weapons are in this area, I think you'll agree with me. Then there's the fizzy spammers. Okay, Try by itself can paint more than Machine, but the reason that Machine is up here in terms of paint output is survivability. This thing does not have the tools to keep itself alive from any of these weapons. In fact, I don't think there's a single weapon in this area, besides maybe the Roller, that the Try can survive an engagement with if it's a player on their level. Fizzy does so much for these weapons, even after the nerf. It's a line, a very long line to swim through. It puts a lot of paint on the map. I think last time I tested it, it was either like 30 or 40 something. It's good paint. And Cooler is an instant ink tank refill, along with an instant respawn, so the sustain of this thing is crazy. And Booyah Bomb does the same thing for, like, putting a bunch of paint far away, doing something important like flipping a zone, destroying a bubble. It does so much for this weapon right here. It still makes me sad to see the state that this weapon is currently in, because as it stands, especially with Neo, I don't know what I was about to call it, Nouveau Machine? Especially with Neo Machine. It really, really struggles to get anything done. In a game where painting the floor is one of the main mechanics, you can't play a frontline weapon that focuses on slaying and not have the ability to, like, paint your way in and out. I think that's all that needs to be said about the buckets. Let's move on. Gloogas are the titular middle of the road paint output weapons. They don't paint a lot, but they don't paint not a lot either. I think the reason that V Glooga is right here, like if you just take Glooga on its own, obviously you have this thing, which it does not paint particularly crazy, and the point sensor isn't helping it, but the Trizuka is, with negative paint. But like you can see with the other Trizuka weapons, it doesn't typically help all that much. This guy's a different story, because he doesn't even need his Trizuka to be insanely useful. But I don't think Zuka's gonna do too much for most weapons. This weapon's no exception. On the other hand, we have this thing. Wall for sustain and for claiming more range safely. That's great. With most weapons that have a wall, you throw it and then you need to refill your ink because you don't have enough to actually make use of your wall. Not the case with Gloogas. So wall is not as much of a tempo issue with this weapon. And I guess I haven't mentioned this, but the range on these guys is actually kind of crazy. It's surprising how much range they have in their spread fire, and especially in their, like, turret mode. They got a lot of range. And they don't paint particularly bad, even at that range, especially in their turret mode. You'd be surprised at how fast this thing paints. Booyah Bomb. Do I need to say any more? It's Booyah Bomb. It does so much. It really does. It can't carry a weapon. Just having Booyah Bomb doesn't mean you're, like, automatically a very effective painter or you have a very high paint output. But it helps. It can accomplish a lot, and as long as you have a weapon that can defend itself, and Glooga definitely can, you roll and you just instantly delete somebody with 2 shots. It's nice to have a tool like that, and you're gonna be able to reach, you know, your charge. You're gonna be able to charge it up. You can keep yourself alive. You have the tools. You have the power. Moving on. Squeezer. Oh god. This poor weapon. I know I say this poor weapon, and it's like genuinely busted. what this thing can do in terms of slaying power is villainous. Menacing. Needs to be stopped. It can't paint the map whatsoever. One of the worst weapons in the game when it comes to paint effectiveness. In terms of actual, like, combat effectiveness, it's a bit of a different story, which is why it's, like, here and not here. But... oh god, how do I put this? It does not paint through combat whatsoever. And... even though the... what do they call it? The rapid fire mode keeps getting nerfed, it's still a decent amount of paint when you hold the button for long enough. Having a wall and Zuka? I mean, what do you need me to say about that? That's insane. This weapon doesn't feel the tempo cost of throwing a wall and refilling your ink tank. It doesn't feel that at all. And Zuka, it's still Zuka. The thing is, just because this weapon can paint doesn't mean you should. If you're picking Squeezer, you're not picking it to paint the zone. You're picking it to delete people. Is that all there? I think that's all I need to say. I guess I should mention Foil Squeezer. Cheap Bomb, very cool. Instant ink tank refill by, the screen. Also quite cool. Screen paints a little bit, yippee. Just enough to make it, like, bumped up a little bit, but not enough to put it, like, anywhere closer. That's the best I can do for Foil Squeezer. It's always fun to see Foil Squeezer, at least, because then you know you're not getting zooped. No, because then you know that, like, the person has enough confidence in their ability to use the weapon that they're not relying on the crutch of Zuka and Wall. It's a great slayer, it's not a great painter. And before we move forward, this not being good at painting when it needs to paint still means it's higher than all of these weapons in terms of paint output, and I do believe that. On one condition. It has to actually be using its paint mode to feel that. If it's actually not doing that and just, you know, firing, playing the weapon correctly, it's probably not going to be all the way up here. Tent. So, you might be surprised to see Tent this low. There was a time when I considered myself a Tent main, so I like to say that I know what I'm thinking. I like to think that I know what I'm saying. I can speak. This weapon can output paint. It can. It does it. It definitely really does. And you gotta understand, we're getting close to bucket here. And this weapon has no paint on its own, but the kit does. We're getting up there. The thing about Tent is, it's a tempo issue. It really feels it. You can paint a good amount with the shot of Tent. It's not a great amount, but it's a solid amount. And the shield, it takes a while to be pulled up, and it takes a lot of your ink to just use it once, but what it can do is a little bit insane. Very slowly, as it moves across the map, it places incredibly safe paint that your team can use to get in, that you can use to basically guarantee a zone flip. It really is really good for what its shield can do. And the main weapon can one-shot if people get too close to it. But that's assuming you can hit the one-shot. It's not easy. Especially considering, like, you miss one time, you're not gonna make it. You're not gonna get another chance. Because the time in between your shots is really low. I would say it is a winner for a couple of metrics in terms of paint effectiveness. Like, it's not really putting itself at risk too much. You have enough range on your main, like, shots that you can keep people away, and anytime something risky is thrown your way, you can just pop the shield up or flare it, and you'll be fine. It's a nice weapon for safety. Just the tempo really hurts. And I would honestly say that paint placed through combat, that metric, isn't too relevant for this weapon. Which is weird to say, because it's been relevant for pretty much every weapon in the game. You kind of alternate between two modes. When you're shooting specifically at other players, which is not something you do particularly often with the tent, I feel like. You're more so focused on putting up the shield, building your special, shooting a couple shots to get a bunch of paint on the ground, and maybe contributing and defending a little bit with the main gun every once in a while. That's kind of not your priority, though, you know? Still, every time it shoots the main gun, it does paint a good bit. That's worth saying. Let's talk about the kits. How do I even say this? Beacon? On this? We know it's a bad sub for paint, right? Like, we all know this, but I don't hate Beacon on Tent. I don't hate it, actually. I think it's nice. This is a frontline weapon. You need to be up there getting your shield into position, and Beacon helps bridge the gap in between respawns. It helps you get, you know, up to your position quicker. The thing is, you knew this was coming. The second tent popped up on the screen. It's the vacuum. Oh, God. Why is it so bad? Stop being so bad, vacuum. Come on. Vacuum makes you stop playing the game for a while. And while Tent does have the best vacuum in the game, because you can walk forward behind your shield, it's still a vacuum. It's still stopping you from playing the game. And if your shield gets shredded, or if like a decav does a funny dash around your shield while you are charging forward with the vacuum, you're just dead. It's just over. So, this kit's more or less irrelevant. More or less. Every once in a while you'll see it when people are spamming strikes. You might see a funny vacuum play. I like that. But what's really relevant here is this second kit, Sorella Tent. The struggle with landmines, in general, is that you can't place them very far forward. You typically use them for defense, and for like if you already control the zone, to keep the zone your color after someone starts shooting it. That is not the case with S-Tent. S-Tent can just put the shield down, charge a bit of ink, and put a bunch of landmines right behind it. Claim half the zone with the Brella, and if people try shooting at the ink that you just put down with the Brella, well, it's suddenly your turf again because the ink mines have exploded. It's fantastic. And then you get the Trizuka. Negative paint. Stop the enemy from playing the game from very far away. And with the points for special and the amount that this thing can paint, you get a good amount of Zukas. I've seen a lot of Tent players that run like a main of special charge up, because you can kind of do that. This is not a weapon with a lot of gear freedom, but it's a pretty viable option. I don't know, I like it. I like it being up here. But I can't place it much higher because we're getting into the area where all of these weapons can paint. Except for this one. Oh god. So here's the deal. The paint output on this thing, it's not horrible. It's not good. At all. But it's not horrible. It's basically just bucket paint, which I'm sure you've heard before. The thing is, there's a reason these two are where they are relative to each other. Sprinkler and Tri-Strikes is a kit that puts out a lot of paint. This is obvious, it goes without saying. Tri-Strikes will get you killed if you are using this weapon, and you pop them in the position that you were trying to be in when you play this weapon, you will just die. So you have to leave the front line, which is not good for accomplishing your goals as the Brella player. Which is why this one has a lot more sustain. Its bomb is obviously a lot more useful for doing things. And then there's Jetpack. If I'm being honest, I could see this one being back here as well. Just one tick to the left, I could see that. The thing is, Jetpack is also very hit or miss. We've said this already, I think. Sometimes you could just miss, and then you get nothing done, and you don't even paint the map, and then 10 seconds have gone by, and you're a Brella again with no special. It can be a struggle. But I do think it lets you apply more pressure, which is good for negative paint, and Auto Bomb is similar. It's nice that you can throw your Auto Bomb and then focus on using your main gun, because your main gun isn't horrible at doing a lot of the things that it can do. It's just critically flawed in some of those ways. There's not really much more to say about this weapon. Let's move on. I guess I could say that I do hope it maybe gets a buff to become relevant. That would be quite nice, wouldn't it? Heavy Splatling. Ignore that. I had to check something. Heavy Splatling is a weapon that I play a lot of, so I'm pretty confident in my answer here. Deco is very low. There's no getting around it. Heavy Deco was a relevant weapon when Kraken was a relevant special. And I'll admit that, like, the synergy with this weapon and Kraken, it's, on one hand, it's not great. On the other hand, it's really, really fun to make someone think, ha, I followed the Heavy Deco, and their Kraken is expiring, and now I get to delete them, but you can charge 4 shots in the blink of an eye, turn around, and flip the situation on its head. It's great. It's really fun. I like this kit. Just point sensor just does nothing. The point sensor does nothing for this weapon. You might think that, like... So with Splatlings, you want a sub that you don't have to make active use of, because you want to spend your ink and your time standing and charging your shots. Point sensor, yeah, it lasts after the fact, but it does not contribute to your paint output. And neither does Kraken, and that's the issue. This weapon, by itself, with no help, does not paint a lot. It paints a decent amount, but not a lot. And the more I use it, the more it becomes very, very clear to me that, like, this thing can't paint. It really, really struggles with it. And that's where this comes in. Sprinkler is obvious. I don't have to really tell you that, like, Sprinkler is great for paint. But Wave Breaker, I think, is the real difference maker here. Obviously, getting Sprinkler on a weapon that doesn't want to make active use of its sub, and just wants to use it every once in a while, is a really good fit. But Wave Breaker? You paint a decent amount with the Heavy Splatling. It's not fantastic, but it's pretty decent. Decent enough that you will be filling up your special many times a game. And what do you get for that? Well, Wave Breaker isn't fantastic, like for damage, not for splatting. It's cool for location, yeah. But the real strength of Wave Breaker, especially in terms of this list, is the instant ink tank refill. And Heavy loves the instant ink tank refill. I think it's the biggest difference between these two kits. With this weapon, you finally fill your special, you stop playing the game for 10 seconds. Then you get your ink tank refill, and you have a worthless sub, and you better be in a good position to not perish after your special ends. This one? It's instant. It's great. Sometimes you might even get a kill or two. I like it. Obviously, we would like it if it had a better special than Wave Breaker, but I think more than most other weapons, the instant ink tank refill is crazy for this thing. It is still a Splatling, so the tempo is like a little bit lower than shooters, but it charges pretty fast compared to the other Splatlings in the game. This thing is like kind of insane how fast it can charge. You'd be surprised, especially after the buff. And the range, obviously. I don't know how I haven't mentioned that. The range is the reason that this thing isn't, like, over here. The deco is not in the middle, specifically because of the range. It can affect such a long distance. And with paint that is relevant. Even without a kit that supports it. The amount of paint it puts out at a range is still a decent amount. And of course, like a shooter, you're gonna be placing a lot of paint, even when you're attacking other players. Granted, it does come with one critical flaw before we move on, that like, sometimes you might be forced out of position to stop swimming. Wait, no, the opposite thing, to stop standing and charging and shooting, and start swimming. And when that happens, this weapon really struggles. You can't really do a lot. Obviously, you can't contribute to the paint if you're running away. But when you're not in that specific position, you get a lot done, and you have the tools to keep people from getting too close. Just with the main gun alone. Alright, let's move on. Dynamo. We try it again. Dynamo. What the fuck is going on with my stomach right now? Dynamo. It keeps happening. It happens every single time. Dynamo. So, I don't think I can add anything to the discussion that is like, what's wrong with Dynamo? Everybody knows. The horizontal flick isn't the worst painting tool in the game, but it's very slow. It's very ink hungry, both bad things for tempo. And the paint output itself isn't anything to write home about. Which is why, like, even having a sprinkler, this thing can struggle quite a bit. Like, sprinkler's good for cooler output, obviously. It fills your special, it paints the map, it's good for paint. It's a good sub, especially for this list. But this is a weapon that needed a bit more. And cooler isn't doing that for you. What cooler is doing is making you more mobile, and making it easier for you to get back into the fray once you've perished horribly because you're a Dynamo player. And the frame data isn't that bad. It doesn't feel particularly bad to use, but for the paint output. The paint output does not feel good. And oh god, I think this is the first time I have to say this. When you use a sprinkler, this is one of those weapons where it's very, very useful to throw it at the ground and use the small amount of ink that immediately places to move around in. And that's how you know you're grasping at straws, when you're starting to complement that aspect of the weapon. I do like the cooler kit, but the thing is, Gold Dynamo is just like, it's what you want when you're looking into paint output and paint effectiveness. Chumps is, I think, the best painting special in the game. Unless you want to, like, more so consider the immediacy and how guaranteed strikes are to put their paint out. I could see that argument going either way. But chumps are really good regardless for how much paint they put out. Getting a lethal bomb is always a good thing. So right off rip, we've got a good kit. And I won't lie, I think the weapon makes pretty good use out of it. With the slower tempo to Dynamo itself, having a bomb that's so versatile and instantly accessible is quite nice. And once in a blue moon, you might even get a combo off of your chump. But there's not really much more to say. This weapon is, like, dramatically hindered by two things. The tempo and the paint output itself. Everything else is great. And I haven't even mentioned that, like, the range is pretty good. It's not exposing itself to risk too often, unless it's fighting, like, weapons with higher range. And it places the same amount of paint when it's fighting that it does when it's painting. So it wins in a lot of areas, it's just the flaws are really, really painful. 96 gal. You might think this weapon is really, really good, considering it gets a good amount of use. And it is, for slaying. And it's a shooter, it's a fully automatic shooter, so it's gonna paint a lot, right? No, not really. It paints in the same way that Bucket paints. It paints a sufficient amount. Enough to get by. Not enough to flip a zone being watched by anybody. And that's the issue. Its paint is more for mobility, than it is for actually accomplishing things, and I mean, it's not ink hungry, so like it can use its wall for the deco kit. And the sprinkler is decent for like adding more paint to the map, yeah. You know where this is going. You know exactly where this is going. They gave Kraken and Vacuum the same weapon. Why'd they do it? Why would they do that? That's so mean. You get no, like... Oh god, your weapon is great with tempo. Genuinely. And then you push the right stick in, and suddenly you are the slowest, least contributive weapon in the match. It's really unfortunate. And it makes the lackluster paint of the main weapon all the more glaring of an issue when the special takes away so much from you. That being said, the two-shot is clean. The two-shot is real clean. And obviously, like, a wall is better for sustain, a sprinkler is better for paint output, a vacuum is worse in every single way than a Kraken. A Kraken is still not all that good. So they're not too far apart, other than in terms of paint effectiveness, where I feel like the vacuum and the wall make a big distance between these two. But that's 96 cal. Oh, let's move on. Oh no. Undercover Brella. You'd be surprised how much this thing can paint when it's left to its own devices. And the kits do a lot for it. I would say the main weapon isn't horrible with paint. It's just a little slow, maybe, in terms of tempo. Like, it doesn't put out too much paint in a very quick amount of time, is the thing. But it can put out a good amount of paint, especially if it's left to its own devices. Thing is, its kits are really, really good, for the most part. I put them in the exact same spot. I know they're like slightly to the left and right of each other, but they are in the exact same spot to me. Both of the kits are interchangeable, really. Like, landmines are always cool. I like landmines a lot. They're probably my favorite sub in the game because they're hilarious. And they're versatile. And Reef Slider, it's only going, like, up in terms of stock. It's really useful. Ever since that bubble buff, Reef Slider's been real good. So, the thing that really holds this weapon back is the main weapon, particularly the damage. It does nothing. And I mean whatsoever. This thing is just like a 4-shot kill on a good day. It's a struggle weapon, yet again. But because the tools it has are really good for paint, it's one of the higher struggle weapons on our list. And I haven't even talked about Sorella's kit. Torpedo. It's fantastic. It's really, really good for everything. Paint effectiveness, it's good for it all. It really is. But being an Undercover Brella is a really risky thing when every single weapon in the game can just out-DPS you in the blink of an eye. And nothing else it does is particularly impressive. I guess it's worth noting that, it places good paint through combat. Like, you point at the enemy, you hold the trigger, you get a lot of paint in between you and them. And it comes out over time. It's not just like, you fling some paint at them, they fling some paint at you, and then they can walk towards you. No, you just keep flinging it. It's decent for that. And it is a Brella that can defend itself with its Brella when it doesn't break instantly. But it doesn't bring anything impressive to the table, really. That's the bottom line here. Alright, moving on. Dousers. I am so sad about these weapons. These might be the weapons I'm the saddest about, because I love to play them. I'm a Splatling and Explo main, so like, these are right up my alley. They're just a Splatling that is also a dually. They have great range. When they do their turret mode, they have pretty good paint output. Pretty notable. The thing is, when you're in the turret mode, that is you at your most vulnerable. So you're not going to want to do that too often. And the spread mode does not paint enough. Not even close. If I'm being honest, I mean, you've all heard the tale that it's not gonna get its paint output increased in the spread mode because then it would be competing with Jet Squelcher. Thing is, Jet Squelcher doesn't paint that much in this game. So, oh god, it doesn't really have anywhere to go, so it's not gonna be getting better, which is a shame because I actually love this weapon. It feels really good to play support with the weapon, even if you can't paint all that much. Outside of paint output, it fits the role so well. The range is great, the dodge roll is a good get out of jail free card in the worst situations. Both of the kits are awesome. It's one of the weapons that can use its landmine liberally and actually gets decent value out of it. And Killer Whale, you know, when they released the second kit with Burst Bomb Tri-Strike, what was the YouTuber? Chase247, I think? He put out a video of like, I'm using V dowsers again because I don't really believe in C dowsers as much. I'm having a lot more fun with V dowsers. I thought it was crazy. I've played the weapon a lot more now. I'm actually believing the exact same things as him, and I'll tell you why. One thing we haven't talked about in terms of ink mine is that it has no white ink frames. This is the first mention of white ink frames in the whole video, somehow. It hasn't been relevant until this moment. Ink mine will always be a good thing to have, because you don't feel the use of your mine as much as you would from a bomb. And because this weapon, like, especially with the C dowsers, you gotta use your sub a lot to make good use out of your weapon. Oh, it can be out of ink the entire game. It doesn't have it when it needs it the most, and it will suffer for that. The other kit, the vanilla kit, before I get too deep in on the custom dowser kit, the vanilla kit, ink mines are great for an ink refill. An ink refill? For not wasting too much ink and getting your ink refilled quickly. And Killer Whale is an instant ink tank refill for chip damage, which is great for a weapon that stays pretty far away doing chip damage itself. It's Protoco, you know? It does good things. And the other kit is strictly better. The reason it's up here is that, like, Burst Bomb, you can affect a further range, and you get the utility of it. Tri-Strike? It's amazing. You get a ton of paint, you get it instantaneously, along with the most absurd Touch of Death hitbox in the game. But this weapon doesn't get to use them all that much, especially the Burst Bombs. You just don't get to use them, or you're out of ink the entire game. And if you're out of ink the entire game, you're not going to be getting a lot of Tri-Strikes. So it's a struggle kit, which is bizarre, because the kit is so good, but the complete package altogether, it's a real big pain. Alright, moving on. We're up here now. We've made it. The first half of the video is over. This is taking forever, isn't it? I'm sorry. I hope you haven't forced yourself to watch this in one sitting, unless you're like a background noise content lover. I'm that. This is for you. No, you can watch this in multiple sittings. You're not gonna be missing too much. Let's move on to the Tri-Stringer. Check out the difference between these two. It's crazy, right? What I've heard is that the vanilla kit is viable in a way, but the kit don't paint whatsoever. It's an ink tank refill at worst. It's also the best you get in terms of paint output, is the ink tank refill. It would be lower. When I started playing Splatoon 3, it was definitely lower. But the paint buffs come together to make something that isn't horrible when it comes to paint output, especially with the tap shots. But there's the problem. You're not using the tap shots, are you? When you're playing this weapon, you're focusing on the maximum range, 3 explosions in one place, hitting someone with all 3 bolts at once, or the medium range 1 ring of charge, you're not doing tap shots. Like, ever. Outside of combat, yeah, you can use your tap shots, but in combat, never. And that's the thing. It does not paint well in combat. The other kit, however, it keeps the instant ink tank refill of Killer Whale, yes. But now it gets a maximum of 140 paint for its special as well. So that's kind of insane. And then you get a sprinkler too. This weapon, like this kit, it's kind of bizarre how much of a direct upgrade it is when you don't need the chip damage of Whale. It's kind of insane. For such a like softball kit too, chumps and sprinkler, like how could that be all that good? It's amazing on this thing. It lets it do the things that the weapon like wishes it could do. It lets it keep a zone, its color, it lets it flip a zone, it lets it do so much. I really do think the kit is fantastic for this thing. Despite being such a like underwhelming kit, it's impressive. And it is by far the best paint output weapon we've talked about today. Which is crazy. I mean, you look at these two, for instance. This thing and the next one below him, Heavy. Heavy's got a sprinkler, and Heavy can paint a good bit, and it has an instant ink tank refill in the Wave Breaker. Chumps are insane. This thing paints better through combat, this thing paints better through its kit. They are not the same. Alright, what's next? Oh, that's a lot of swords! We're gonna talk about all the swords at once. Because they're very similar. I think it's worth doing that way. So here's the thing. They all paint pretty well. Like, impressively well. You wouldn't expect Stamper, with its like crazy ink hungriness, to be able to paint as much as it does, but it's got good paint. Not great paint, but paint that I would call bucket paint, which is why it's here on the same spot in the list, with a little bit more in terms of effectiveness for reasons we will get into right now. The range on the vertical slice, it's fantastic. The horizontal, it's pretty good. It's not quite as good as Bucket's main button, but you get a good amount of paint just by using the weapon. The paint output, I would say, is pretty much identical to Bucket's. And the Bucket doesn't have bad paint. Rather, V-Bucket. So V-Bucket's kit is identical to the paint of the main weapon of the sword. And then you get to the kits. This is where their effectiveness goes kind of crazy. The effectiveness of Bomb and Tri-Strike on V-Bucket is kind of crazy. Crab on a sword? That's two crazy effective tools that let you impact a crazy range with a lot of different things, like a lot of paint, a lot of DPS. You can do a lot. And then you see the other kit is Burst Bomb Zipcaster, on the weapon that uses Zipcaster better than any other. It's one of the highest paint effectiveness weapons in the game, which is why its paint output had to be nerfed so much. I'd say at the beginning of the game, this was about where Wiper was, because the vertical just painted so much. It was kind of insane. But now, like, even where it's at, it's still pretty crazy. And then you get into Decav. Okay, this weapon is insane. Like, what more is there to say? The horizontal, they're both horizontals. The weak slash on the toothbrush. Whose idea was this? This paints way too much. Like, oh my god. I do think, while it does paint one hell of a lot, and it did just get a nerf, but that nerf was not all that relevant. I don't know. I don't see it being crazy high. It paints a lot, yes. But does it paint an absurd amount? I don't know. I don't think I would say yes. I know it has really, really good paint. And when it paints through combat, it paints really well. It paints a nice thick line that you can move around in and move straight in. You can do a lot with its paint. The thing is, It's a slayer. It's not supposed to focus on painting. It's not gonna stop it. But it has a job to do, is what I'm getting at. If it's not slaying the enemies, then like, what is even the point of having crazy paint? So it's gotta paint. It's gotta slay its enemies. So you'll end up using the dash slash, and that thing is slow. And then we get to the kits. Let's talk about charcoal first. We know that Inkjet is a coin flip. It's a struggle special on almost any weapon it's on. And the wall isn't doing this weapon all that many favors. It's nice. It's like having a bubble in your pocket. Your ink efficiency isn't such that you can just use it willy-nilly. It can be a bit of a challenge. Granted, your main weapon is still the toothbrush, so I think on main weapon alone you're all the way up here. But do consider that, like, the wall's ink costly, and the jetpack takes away your main weapon. I think those are the reasons that it's below Stamper for me, even though the main weapon has good paint. And then you get to vanilla decav. I was a believer in charcoal decav. I really was. But you can't argue with the results. Suction bomb, bubble, suction bomb. That's all there is to say. Suction bomb paints like 30 or 40 paint. It's a lethal bomb. You can throw two of them one after the other. Bubble on a weapon that can one-shot you from melee range, that already has a decent amount of range. We haven't really talked about that. Its range is definitely lower than Stamper, but it's still good. And while it might struggle in some situations, like if someone's up on a ledge, it might struggle to hit them, that ain't got nothing to do with the paint. It doesn't even need to approach that kind of situation. It can just stay back. Play the positions that it's actually good at playing. It's real good. That's all there is to say about decav. And then there's the one with the big gap. Wiper. So I'm talking about these three at the same time because there's some things that need to be said in between them. For the first two, they're slaying weapons that can paint. For the Wiper, it's a skirmishing weapon that can slay and can paint. It's versatile. It really is. Which is why this kit right here is what lands it at such a spot. We all know Torpedo is insane, and now that Ultra Stamp is also insane, the strengths of this weapon, they can shine. Ultra Stamp does 60 on the outside hitbox, Torpedo is a lot of damage too, you can combo off of that and like end an enemy in the blink of an eye with the Wiper. And that's kind of the difference. This kit, its tools help it to do its job, and they do an incredible job of actually doing that. This one's tools actively hinder it. What do I mean by that? Beacon does nothing for this weapon whatsoever. It helps your team. That's it. It does not help you. It can help you get back into the fray, but you're not getting into the fray with this thing, and I'll tell you why. Without the Torpedo and without the Ultra Stamp, you have nothing to combo off of. Going in is not rewarded with this thing. And then you get your specials. And if you are in, you get your specials, you get your special. And if you are in, and you push the missile button, mysteriously, you perish. Somehow. How does it happen? Giving this thing missiles was not the best idea. It just forces you to leave the front line, and as you can see with the weapon immediately to its left, that's not a recipe for success. The thing is, Base Wiper, its main gun, does paint a lot. And it paints effectively too. When it's in combat, it is painting the exact same amount that it is painting outside of combat. It's really good for that. The amount isn't insane, but it's high. The amount that it can paint. So much that you, like, if you're new to the game, you might even find yourself, like, believing that it's a painting weapon. But it can do so much more. And the tempo! These swords are all fast. All of them. But this one is crazy! This thing is so quick! And it keeps getting buffed to get faster and paint more. It really is insane what this weapon can do. If you need a skirmisher / slayer, and your team comp is struggling with a bit of paint, it's the pick. It is like a no-brainer. Let's move on. You know what? I was going to talk about these two separately, but I don't think I will. Dapples and Tetras, they're just so bizarrely similar, despite having completely different mechanics attached to them. They're feeding weapons. We know this. They're both the QR weapons of the gang. They don't paint a crazy amount, but they paint enough that it's noticeable. And then you get to their kits. These two both have Reef Slider. That's a good paint tool. It's a good utility tool. It can do a lot. And their bombs are both like tracking tools, one of which is significantly more useful. But this one, with its range and 4 dodge rolls, gives it a run for its money. I don't think it quite topples the difference between Autobomb and Torpedo. Without the special Tetra-specific mechanics, Dark Tetras are maybe like right here. But I think Dapples, especially in today's metagame, are a little bit stronger. This thing. Light Tetras. Oh god. I'm probably gonna get a little bit of flack for putting this one as far forward on the paint effectiveness thing that I did. Because of its game plan of hold W. I mean, you know what, no, this isn't TF2. Hold the control stick forward. It gets into position to use its sprinkler very creatively. But that's nothing compared to the paint output. No, not paint output. The paint effectiveness that you can do with the Zipcaster. You can put yourself into the best position to put the most frustrating paint to deal with onto the map. And that's not even mentioning the negative paint that Zipcaster gives you. You just show up as a Zipcaster. You don't even need a main weapon. You just look at the enemy and click right bumper, and you get them. It's a good special. Granted, like, a sprinkler and a recall special isn't quite gonna match the paint output of Dark Tetra's kit, but it's something. I don't know, I could see this one being a little further back, but at the same time, I think Zipcaster really does a lot for this weapon. So... Vanilla Dapple Dualies. Oh, they're not too good, are they? It's kind of telling that after all the buffs, V-Dapples just doesn't see any use. You know the reason. Like, I don't have to tell you the reason. Sure, the weapon can paint enough to get its cooler. Beacons are not keeping it alive, and the frame data of Dapples, it's good frame data, it might just save your life. It is still frame data in service of putting yourself right next to the enemy into their kill range. And that's a very simple thing to backfire upon you. So... yeah, this thing really struggles with paint effectiveness. It can't affect the world outside of its immediate range and its dodge roll range. It just can't. It's got no tools. And the frame data ain't helping. I don't believe in vanilla Dapples. It does not exist. Up next, we have ballpoints. These are weird. I'm like one of the weirdos out there who actually likes Ballpoint Nouveau, but I think that's because it's so bad that it makes me like smile when I use it. You know how much I like ink mines, if you've been around here so far. I love them, they're great, they can do a lot. And vacuum is horrible for everything that we've talked about so far. Vacuum is not good. But it's funny. Oh, it's funny. I do like to use the vacuum. And on a weapon that I enjoy using with a sub I enjoy using, I'll take it. Does that mean I think it's good? No. In fact, taking off the vacuum of this thing would bump it up to like right here. Giving it any other special, you'd be right here. And the reason this one's a little higher than that is pretty much entirely because of fizzies. We're just talking about the kits right now. We'll talk about the main gun in a second, but fizzies do so much for every weapon that they're on. And while Splatlings don't like using their sub, especially in combat, and this thing, like the Knot, is always managing its charge. It's never doing anything else. So you don't use your fizzy all that often, but it does do a lot of things. And then there's Inkjet too. It's a recall special, it's a coin flip, yes. But it is like far and away better than Vacuum in every possible metric. Even with the state that it's currently in the metagame, I would still take V Ballpoint over Nouveau in any comp. So let's talk about the main gun. The short range mode, it's cool, it's strong, it's nice as a get off me tool if people are really close to you. You can just obliterate them instantly. Like, surprise! I've got rapid fire. And you're done. It's good, it's great. I like that. The problem is, you paint a lot when you're in your short range mode. But when you're using this weapon for its intended purpose, which is to be a backline that can defend itself, you're gonna be using its long range mode a lot. And I think that's the reason it's so low in terms of paint output. The weapon it reminds me the most of, long range mode, is Squeezer. You do not paint the map whatsoever when you're using long range mode. You just don't. You just don't. Like, what do you want me to say? It's a little unfortunate, because I like the weapon a lot, but in order to actually get any paint onto the map, and you're the backline, painting is like something that you want your backline to be doing. It demands that you stop using the weapon to fight the enemies, which is horrible, really. But that's Ballpoint. Now, Pro. Pro is the next halfway point. Glooga's were the halfway point of the whole list. Pro is the halfway point of the rest of the list. I guess it would be the 75% of the waypoint, I would say. You'd be surprised at how much paint Pro can output. With its slow fire rate and the lack of, like, actual paint that it puts on the map, you wouldn't expect it to be all that good at it, but that adds up really fast, that paint. But the reason it's here isn't just because it's got, like, good range, good kill power, good, you know, the ability to keep itself alive with shooter movement, main strafing, good damage per shots. It's the kit. Both of these kits are really cool, minus the dart. The dart, I mean, it's not the worst thing. You can do a funny damage combo if, like, you hit 2 shots and then they get out of your range. That's neat. It's cool to have. It's pretty useless, unfortunately. But the thing about V Pro is... V Splattershot Pro is that you're a paint bot. That's all you do. If you get too close, you don't have many tools to defend yourself. You better be really good at aiming your weapon. It's kinda easy to run this thing over if you have, like, high DPS on a weapon that's good at short range. But it's got a really cheap crab, so it gets a lot of crabs. So it's not the worst. I couldn't put it any further back than this, because that kit is really solid. Not as solid as the Pro kit, though. With the Pro kit? Not as solid as the Forge kit, though. The Forge kit is kind of insane. We've talked about the amazing things that Booyah Bomb can do, and because it refills your ink tank, it's pretty easy to suction Booyah Suction, and Suction is really, really good. I like to, like, clown on Suction a little bit because it's, like, low tempo and high ink cost, but it's really, really good. You can accomplish a lot of things with the Suction Bomb. It suits this weapon well. It gives you the insta-kill lethality that you need, and it gives you the paint that you want. The whole kit. Yeah, I'd say Forge, Pro Forge. I think it's a pretty good kit. I think it's good for paint output, good for keeping yourself alive, good for keeping the enemies dead. It's a good weapon. And that's all there is to say. I guess I could say that, like, in combat, it's not bad either. Like, the paint it places in combat, rather. Obviously, in combat, it's not That's all there is to say. Well, I guess I could say how, like, it places good paint through combat. Like, it doesn't really struggle too much to paint when it's fighting. It still paints the same amount that it paints when it's not fighting. Which is what you want out of a painting weapon. You don't want to have to, like, switch between painting mode and fighting mode. This one bridges that gap pretty well. It's a good weapon. That's all there is to say. Oh no. L3. Alright. I'm sorry, L3 mains. I'm sorry. I know, it's like, why? Why is it all the way to the left? What did this weapon do to you? It has a curling bomb, it has a crab. It can shoot so much and paint so much of the ground. You know why. This thing can't defend itself. It gets run over in a heartbeat. At least L3D has a burst bomb to set up for a combo to keep itself safe. And now Ultra Stamp is kinda good, so this is not like the worst of kits. But the thing about L3 is that, like, it's a shooter. Shooters are known for painting a lot. This one struggles to paint for the same reason that H3 does. We talked about H3 earlier, and how H3, like, it kinda needs the perfect situation to get the most paint out of every shot. And this one's not too different. It's a little different because of how fast you can fire it, but it still wants, like, flat areas without much blocking the way if you want to get a bunch of paint with this weapon. Which is an important thing to keep in mind when you exist solely to paint for Crab. It's still Crab. Crab is still cool. Which is why it's all the way up here in terms of paint output, but in terms of effective paint, having a Crab is not going to save you from all the flaws this thing brings on. Burst Bomb and Hammer might. That might do it. It's hard to say though. It's still an L3 at the end of the day. The base weapon itself, the main weapon, is still pretty vulnerable. And the kit does a lot of heavy lifting for D. But even with all that heavy lifting, I can't see it any further to the right. Or up. I don't know, it's just a bit of a struggler. Even this high up. Speaking of strugglers, oh boy, someone's gonna hate me for this. That I know. We all know that Hydra takes a long time to charge. Novel realization, I know. The thing is, I've played a lot of Hydra. I've 4-starred every single Splatling in the game just for fun. I like the Splatlings. I don't hate Hydra, okay? This placement might, like, tell you that I do. I don't. But let me, like, explain a little bit. This weapon doesn't paint all that much. It does paint when it's charged. And at the end of the game, like, in a game of Turf War, because it's timed, that's been, like, my best metric for the numbers. 1,000, 1,100 on a really good game? It's not terrible for that. It's just that it's not painting way more often than it's painting. And then you run into the kits. So there's a reason why Custom Hydra is higher than V Hydra in terms of paint effectiveness. And it's a little shocking if you don't play the weapon, but you'll understand what I mean. The main vanilla Hydra, it has a really good kit for it. Auto Bomb is the kind of sub that you can throw and not think about. It's not too costly, so you don't have to refill ink too much, which is great for a weapon that's already really bad with downtime. Booyah Bomb. Let's talk. Booyah Bomb is really good. There's just no, like, spinning it as it's a bad thing. But there's a critical flaw. Booyah Bomb takes time to charge up, to throw, and if there's one thing that Hydra does not have, it's time. The Auto Bomb does not take a lot out of your ink tank, but it does take some. The Booyah Bomb takes more time, and then your weapon charging takes even more time. It is so slow with that kit that, like, having ink mines alone, a sub with no white ink frames, and then an instant ink tank refill and splatter color screen, like, it's really nice what that does for the weapon. And that's kind of the reason that I think V Hydra struggles a little bit. But even saying that, C Hydra doesn't do much better. It's still the Hydra. It can output paint, but only when it's firing. But that amount is notable enough that it's made it all the way up here. So that's Hydra. Bamboo. It's another one of those cases where, like, we had the vanilla kit and everyone thought it was bad. And they released the second kit and everyone was like, woo! Second kit! And it's good too! And then everyone started using the vanilla kit again. Both kits are really good. It's just the difference is very obvious. One of these is much better at painting than the other. In a metagame where pencil is a really strong option, Bamboo will always be somewhat close. But Killer Whale, it's good for chip damage, which is good for the main weapon, which is good for negative paint on the enemy team. Auto Bomb's not doing you many favors. It's still a lethal bomb with a little bit of location. It's just the main weapon. It can paint a little bit, but not enough that it's gonna, like, tip the scales, you know? It's not a crazy amount of paint. It's a good amount of range, and the tempo is really good. It's just, you know, it struggles a little bit. And then you go through the other part of, like, when you're shooting at enemies, especially on a weapon that's a multi-shot kill, you're gonna be shooting the same line repeatedly, which means the second shot isn't placing any paint, so that's a struggle. It is still a high-ranged weapon, so it can do this all at low risk, and it's pretty fast. But then you get to Bamboo 2. Bamboo is not the most gear-intensive weapon. If you want to run double fizzies the entire match, go right ahead. You can. And you know what that means. Double fizzy, chump, double fizzy. That is the sequence that makes this weapon insane in terms of paint output and effectiveness. It makes it an option in terms of, like, backline paint support. It makes it a really interesting option that can do a lot. It really is kind of a great value pencil that relies more on its kit than it does its main weapon. I think it's interesting. I think it's a fun weapon. And the thing that really holds it back the most for me is the tap shots, which are great for fighting and great for damage, and the worst painting tool on the entire list so far. We're going to talk about Flingza and Big Swig at the same time, and they're in wildly different positions. These are the painting rollers. And here's the thing. When you're playing Flingza, you use a lot of vertical flick, because vertical flick is your best painting tool. It's sometimes even your best combat tool. For mid-range, it is your best combat tool. Vertical flick is just real nice. You keep your mobility with it too. It's great. You'll use a lot of it. And then you look at Swig. Swig's vertical flick is its best combat tool, and its worst painting tool. If you're playing Swig and trying to use the weapon in a way that keeps you alive and defeats the enemies and wins the game, through like enemy defeating, you're not going to get a lot of paint. You're going to get like less than 500. You're just not going to paint a lot. It's unfortunate. You can use the horizontal to output a pretty crazy amount of paint, which is why it's our highest weapon so far in terms of paint output. But it just doesn't do a lot outside of that. You try to use the weapon to fight, you're making no paint. The paint placed through combat is at a critical low point. And then it's still a roller, so it can't do a lot without risking itself. So, you would need the kits to be your saving grace. And they're not good. One of them has Dart, which is not always a strict negative, but it's usually not much of a positive, at best. Dart does not do a lot for Big Swig. It's not like your vertical guarantees that Dart will combo. It doesn't. It just doesn't do that. Vanilla Big Swig is one of the most depressing kits in the game. You get a wall. Wall is great. We know this. It's balanced really high. It's up there. It's a good tool. You don't use it. You can use it. You can use your wall. You can have a good time. Until you hit the right stick. And then you're not playing the game for 10 seconds. So, when you pick the Big Swig, you make a choice. Either you get the special that's good, which is the Rain, which is not bad for the Swig, by the way. It works well with the weapon, and it's a good special on the whole. And you get the Dart. Or, you pick the one with the wall, and you get the Vacuum. It's the lesser of two evils again, which is never a good thing to have. And then you couple that with the bad paint in combat, and you get a weapon that's just really lackluster. Like, if you want your Big Swig to paint, they're not gonna be fighting for the entire game. The thing needs a kit to save it. But Flingza, on the other hand, is insane. Like, it does everything that Big Swig wishes it could do, but better. Suddenly, when you're in combat and using your vertical flick, you're painting a ton. The only time you're not painting with the Flingza is when you're doing, like, a stealth approach, a bit of sharking, and then a horizontal, for a quick insta-kill. And it's good for that. It's just a good weapon for a lot of different things. And then you get to the kits, and it's even better. By the way, I don't mention... By the way, I don't recommend ever rolling with a roller if your goal is to paint the map. Big Swig is the one exception to this rule. But it can have that, considering it's bad at like everything else. Flingza is amazing at painting with just the main gun, but its kits do so much. Landmines, great for defensive holds, and like, if you have a team with a bunch of landmines on it, it's great to add Flingza to the mix as a backline. Missiles, we've already talked about how good Missiles is at everything it does, and this is pretty much the best missile farmer in the game if you want a weapon that can fight. I know I use fight in quotes there, because it's not particularly amazing at that, but it's something. And I guess I should mention before we get on to the other kit, mines, not having white ink frames. This is a weapon that it cares a little bit about its ink efficiency, so that helps, and mines are still good, for all the reasons we've discussed so far. Foil Flingza. I like how when this thing was released, people believed in it so much, for so long. People were like, this is the better one. I believed in it. I liked Foil Flingza. Getting a suction bomb on the Flingza is a really cool thing to have. It just kinda sucks that Screen is at best an ink tank refill, and at worst an active hazard to anyone with vision problems. That's not particularly cool. But Screen doesn't do a lot for Flingza. If nothing else, you do 40 damage with your fling from the furthest range that you can hit. If you hit 2 flings and then throw a screen at somebody, you can combo them, yeah. For like the most obscure and difficult to realize combo in the game, sure. It's not great, but it's fine. It's fine. I like the weapon, I like the kit. But it's not great. It is still a Flingza at the end of the day, so it can paint a pretty crazy amount. And having the bomb is, I think, what puts it a bit further in terms of paint effectiveness over vanilla, just because of the range it can impact. But let's move on. We're going to talk about the Octobrush and the Painbrush at the same time. Which is kind of weird, now that I think about it. But they are very, very similar. They're in a pretty perfect little arc here, aren't they? We'll talk about Painbrush at the very beginning. I like Painbrush Nova a lot. I think missiles on a weapon that can put out this much paint is always a good thing to have. So you would want it to be your paint support, but the thing is, it really struggles in that role because of its lack of range, because of its bad, like, what's the word? It's bad frame data. Even with the faster swing speed in between swings, it still takes a long time to wind up. And it can't do much outside of, like, painting the immediate area and spamming missiles. The other kit doesn't fare much better. Curling Bomb is Curling Bomb, we all love Curling Bomb. But all the paint that Painbrush can do, and it just amounts to a wave breaker. So Octobrush. Let's talk about the Octobrushes. I play a lot of Octobrush. And here's the deal. Noctobrush, the Nocturnal Brush over here. It's really cool. Beacons are nice for the weapon. It's a different style of play between the two. One of them is more of a support brush that kind of plays how you would want Painbrush to play. And the other is a hyper aggro slayer. I think the cool thing about Noctobrush is that it can defend very well. Anyone like rushing your sniper or anything, you can just be there waiting for him and it's over. And you give beacons to people so they can jump out safely. Oh god. And you give beacons to people so that they can jump out safely and to safety, and it's a good kit. And the rain definitely helps with a lot of things. It's one of those cool combos how, like, rain lets you do your Octobrush stuff for longer and with more consistency. And Octobrush doesn't paint a particularly bad amount, but it doesn't paint a particularly good amount on its own either. Its kit does a lot of heavy lifting here. And the next one, even though its kit is so much better, Vanilla Octobrush, it still kind of struggles a little bit in terms of paint output. It's one of those weapons that, like, in the right situation, it can paint a lot. But it has to focus on slaying. Sometimes that means sharking. Sometimes that means specifically not painting and fighting instead. And its kit's very good for that. Suction Bomb is amazing. It's a bit of an ink cost, but it's still amazing. The brushes don't really struggle for ink except for Painbrush. And then there's Zip. This is one of the better Zip users in the game. I mean, what else is there to say? It's really good for that. It makes for quite the effective fighting tool and the effective painter. But it's still Octobrush. And here's the critical flaw of Octobrush. Kill time. No matter where you are, no matter what position you're in, no matter what sort of advantage you've gotten over your enemy, if you're fighting a Splattershot, even if you take the first swing and they don't know where you are, if their aim and reaction time is good enough, they will win the fight 90% of the time. It can be a very rough weapon to do the things that it's good at, and the kit does a lot of heavy lifting for that, but not enough heavy lifting to make it much further than this, unfortunately. Those are my thoughts, at least. 52 Gal. So, 52 Gal has earned a bit of a reputation as a selfish weapon, and it is. A lot of its tools, hell, all of its tools, are very self-applicable. They don't really do much for your team on the whole. They do a lot more for you, specifically. The kit's Wall helps you play 52 Gal. Killer Whale might set you up with a combo, might drive an enemy into a position where you can corner them. Killer Whale at least can combo off your teammates, which is nice. The other one, Screen, do I really have to talk about Screen this much today? I don't think Screen's very good. I don't think it's even, like, particularly relevant. It's funny with the Hydra where, like, if you're fighting a sniper, which is your worst matchup, you can just throw a Screen up and, like, pray that that's your counterplay done and dusted, and then it doesn't work out. screen just doesn't do a whole lot for any weapon beyond, like, simply refilling your ink tank instantly. So, Gal basically has a worthless special that it can spam because the main weapon of 52 Gal is actually a pretty good painter. But it's not an insane painter, just pretty good. And while it can paint a good amount, and it can definitely slay with those 50 damage shots, the paint it places is very specific. Not quite as badly as the 96, but it can't paint massive areas very quickly. It can only paint general areas with some haste. So it's kind of middle of the road when it comes to its tempo compared to some of the other higher painting shooters out there. But it can still accomplish a lot, and because of its like easy 2-shot kill, it's not risking much putting itself in those positions. I think that's all there is to say on 52 Gal. It's good. It's not bad. If you have a comp that's like a little paint hungry, you can't really go wrong. Unless you really need a painting weapon, in which case it will not serve the role. Dualies. So, if you're not too familiar with the game, end parries might be a confusing thing to see in their position right now. Like, why are end parries not, like, very, very effective? When I play end parries, I roll a curling bomb, and I go right behind it, I do 2 rolls, and I do a splashdown, and it works every time. Right? No. What are you talking about? What do you mean? It doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. It's one of the situations where it's like, a player that you're beating with that strategy is a player you would be beating with any strategy. It's a noob killer kind of thing. But curling bomb is good for paint. And splashdown can paint, but it's not the best tool for painting. You know what I'm saying, I've said it before. So the real crux of this weapon ends up being the main gun. And they can paint. End parries and Splat Dualies, they can paint quite a bit. Not quite as much as some of the weapons that we're going to talk about very shortly, but it's a viable amount. It's a very, very useful amount of paint, the amount they can put out. Just a little bit under-tuned as far as, like, paint bots go. Which is why you don't particularly see Dualies speccing fully into paint botting. They're still good for it. And especially because, like, vanilla Dualies, that kit is insane. Suction Bomb Crab from the start of the game, it's always been one of the best weapons. And it can do so much. It can paint bot, just not like as well as some of the other weapons we're going to talk about in just a few. But it can skirmish, it can slay, and it can play towards its kit. It's got a lot going for it. That's not even mentioning the range, but its tempo is crazy. It really is like one of the fastest weapons out there. And with 2 dodge rolls, it's not really putting itself in the most risky positions. I guess there's the last thing to say, in combat, how is its paint? If you're in turret mode and firing at one enemy specifically, you're painting a straight line. That's not as good as when you're not doing that and painting a big splotch. But it's still something. It's not nothing. It's just like, it's better at painting when it's not fighting, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Squelchers. Dualie Squelchers. They're both in a pretty similar spot for me. I think they're the same in terms of effective paint. And I'll get into why, but first let's go into paint output. These weapons can paint a lot. They're more skirmishers, we know this. They're not particularly designed to paint a lot, but they can paint a lot. Especially if they're left alone to their own devices, they'll just cover the entire map. And that's kind of the draw, because if you then try to stop them from doing that, they can waste a bunch of your time and paint even more. They're a really good weapon for the consistency of paint output that they provide. The only real drawback there, I mean, you could say their time to kill, maybe, but it's their ink efficiency. They're ink hungry. They're very ink hungry. So that stops them from playing the game 24/7. And I guess they had to choose their positions pretty carefully, because there are a lot of weapons out there that can outrange or out DPS them. They have a very specific niche. And I like that niche. I like what they do. Given that their paint cost is so, like, high, having the Wave Breaker and Chumps instantly refill your ink tank is a great thing. The only major consideration from there is that, like, the subs. I think the subs are the reason that V Squelchers are below custom. The thing about beacons, you use them when you're not in combat, so you get to use your whole ink tank in combat. Because you have to, like, wait in the ink when you throw your bomb, and this weapon needs its ink tank back in that kind of situation. You just lose a little bit in terms of paint output throughout the game, but the bomb still does so much for you that it's like... it's hard to put it any lower than this. I think they're a really well-balanced weapon, if I'm being honest. And then we get the regular Jet Squelcher. So... this is another struggler, I think. You get two options. Dart, wall... nope, fuck. Dart, vacuum, all the way back here. Toxic Mist, rain. Still not too far forward in terms of effectiveness. The weapon has a very slow time to kill. It doesn't paint all that much, all that fast. It's lower tempo. It's very, very low tempo. Which is crazy, considering the Dualie Squelchers have so many similarities to this. But they just, like, they put out a completely different set. But they just play the game completely differently. And when you're forced to play Jet Squelcher in its very specific way of being more towards the back and painting the ground very slowly with these kits, you're not going to accomplish much at the bottom line. I like this weapon a little bit because it's like a Splatling as a shooter, you know? I'm obligated to like Splatling-like things. But it really hurts to use it when the kits are so hinderous. Like, vacuum is a strict negative for this thing, it really is, and dart is not enough to make that kit worth using. Toxic Mist, I don't think Toxic Mist does anything for this kit. You can just squid roll through it. If you're lucky, it might secure you one more shot on an enemy than you were originally going to hit for 65% of your ink tank. And then rain's pretty good. For a weapon that plays this way, I think rain fits the weapon quite well. Although with the range, and the slow time to kill, and the low tempo, it's just not turning any heads, you know? I guess the last thing to talk about would be that, like, it's not risking much when it's painting. You know? Like, it's pretty safely far back as long as no one rushes it down, because it has no tools to defend itself in that kind of situation. But I mean, when it's fighting, it's still painting as much as it was before it was fighting. So that's something. It's a struggler. Speaking of strugglers... oh, poor Nova. Nova, quote-unquote, paints a lot. I don't necessarily think it paints all that much, if I'm being honest. It paints, but it doesn't paint a crazy amount. It's outpainted by a lot of, like, the weapons in the game that are actually good at painting. The paint is pretty sparse. And it's not the most traversable unless you've been firing in the same direction for long enough. Okay, I spent as long as I could not talking about the weapon. It's so weak. What can it do? If it's rushed down, it's over. the kit for Vanilla Nova does nothing for you. You get a bunch of whales. What's that gonna do? You gotta hit like... Oh, you chipped someone with your whale. You gotta hit 4 shots still. At least Nova is spamming a special that has a coin flip of being useful. And the synergy with Ink Mine and Jetpack, it's good synergy. It's pretty cool, honestly. That you can put an Ink Mine next to your Jetpack recall so that you can know if someone is camping your Jetpack recall. That's pretty good synergy. But being a paint bot that gets a lot of jetpacks in today's meta is not a viable thing, no matter how good the kit is for that. It's unfortunate. I think what this weapon needs is to be more accurate. And I mean like, fully more accurate. Like splash. Give it splash accuracy, we might have an interesting weapon on our hands. Okay. The painting buckets that aren't Explo. We're gonna talk about Bathtub and Dread at the same time. Because they kind of have a similar, not game plan, but strategy. Output a ton of paint as fast as you can, so that everyone can move, and then when you got the paint advantage, go in. Use your unique projectile to do some stuff. Unfortunately, one of these weapons does this a lot better than the other. It's very clear which one of these is actually good for something, unfortunately. We were all there when Dread D got announced. It's still painful looking back on it. A kit that does nothing whatsoever. But first I wanted to talk about the Bathtub. Because the Bathtub is a bit of a pitfall. People might think this is like the best painting weapon in the game. We don't have to talk about the Bathtub Deco. Because, I mean, Kraken is still Kraken, and Dart is still Dart. And if that's your only tools, your main weapon better be real good at putting out paint, and that's the unfortunate thing. Bathtub does not put out a crazy amount of paint on its own. You might think otherwise, but what are your options for painting more with Bathtub? Maybe I'm missing something. Either you don't flick and you paint in a straight line, you get a nice clean line paint. Or you flick, and you get a somewhat clean line, and then incredible... So you're not going to be getting much done if you're trying to paint creatively. So your only strategy with the main weapon of the Bloblobber ends up being use as much of the projectile as possible, and try to set up for positions where it's like, kinda janky. That's what you want. And that's why Vanilla Blob... call it that. That's why Vanilla Bathtub does a lot more for the weapon. Sprinkler and Rain help plug the gaps that your main weapon's paint doesn't quite fill. You might think that that makes for a really good painting weapon, but as we discussed in the very beginning of this video, it is so slow to do so. It does not get its paint done quickly at all. It does not get its paint onto the field quickly at all. It is so easy to just paint over what it's painting with, like, any of these weapons. Any of them. It's kind of insane. It's the tempo issue. And on top of that, the weapon doesn't have a very reliable, like, killing tool, so it can kind of get rushed down to its death instantly. At the very least, it places a lot of paint when it's fighting and when it's not fighting. It places a lot of paint. It's just not the most valuable paint, and it's not the most immediately usable paint. That's the bottom line here. And that's where Dread comes in, with a completely different means of enacting the same goal of paint the entire map. Dread instantaneously places a ton of paint. If you're fighting an enemy, you're making a thick line. If you're not fighting an enemy, you flick, you make 2 thick lines in a single swipe. It can paint a ton. On a kit that has no painting tools, and at the very least has a wavebreaker that refills its ink tank, it can struggle a little bit, because the main weapon isn't, like, infallible, you know? It's good what it can do, the paint that it can put out is great, the damage too is impressive. It needs something to bridge the gap a little bit, because there are things that the weapon just can't do, and Beacon and Wavebreaker are not doing it for you. Vanilla Dread? It's a little bit linear what it can do, i.e. Reef Slider makes it like pigeonhole into playing a very specific way, but even considering that, it can paint so much. An absurd amount. Reef Slider paints, yes. But the real draw here is the bucket itself, which has like genuinely some of the highest paint output in the game, single-handedly. And getting a lethal bomb, and the biggest one, with a special that can paint a bunch, is really nice. It's just a shame that, like, when you click the special button, you usually end up dying for it. If it weren't for that, I think this weapon would be much higher up. If it could just be painting for a special that it actually wants, we'd be in a very different world right now. I guess what's also worth saying is that, like, it's got pretty crazy range. You might not expect it, but it's not bucket range. It's a good deal further than that. So you can kind of keep yourself safe by staying outside your enemy's range just by spamming your trigger over and over again. And you're not putting yourself at risk too much for doing that. As long as they don't, like, rush you down with, like, lethal efficiency. Because you are a little slow when it comes to time to kill. But that's not the most important thing when it comes to being a paint bot, and this thing has what it needs to fill that role. Wellstring. Wellstring is very interesting. In the first draft of this tier list, before Stamp was buffed, Custom was in the place that Vanilla is, and now it is swapped. It's not that Custom has gotten worse, it's just that I kind of realized maybe Custom wasn't all that good. I don't think it brings all that much to the table. It's really cool having the double location, and the instant ink tank refill that is Wavebreaker. But the kit just doesn't really accomplish anything, which is really unfortunate. The other one's kit, Autobomb, we've talked about Autobomb a bunch, we know what it can do, and Ultra Stamp is now, like, its own instant ink tank refill, combo damage, one shot. It does a lot, surprisingly. And the thing about Wellstring is that, like, it doesn't have the highest range value in the game. So getting a tool that can bail you out when you've gotten slightly too close, because you have to move closer and closer to keep the pressure up with this weapon, getting a tool like Ultra Stamp that can just turn the tables on anyone rushing you down, that's pretty viable. That's pretty valuable. It's not a bad tool at all for this weapon. And the thing about Ultra Stamp is you don't want to be giving it to weapons that are strictly backlines. You want it on weapons that, like, kind of skirmish. And you wouldn't expect this one to skirmish, but with how it plays, it's not a traditional skirmisher, but it certainly does something similar. So, before we move on, the main weapon itself warrants discussion. When you're not charging, genuinely, the paint output is kinda similar to Reflux. And that's impressive. And don't forget, this is a bow, and the bows have this neat little trick called no white ink frames. You can go right into the ink and recharge in a heartbeat. If you're timing it right, you can basically have infinite tap shots. So it's great for painting spawn, it's great for, like, plugging gaps. It just struggles a little bit with being rushed down, because that tap shot isn't particularly good. You end up having to hit your, one ring charge, which is another skill shot that can be its own issue depending on how good you are at using the weapon. But here's the thing. When you are in your proper position, you're charging to full, your choices are this. You shoot out your spreaded 5 bolts, and you get a good amount of paint in, along with a line that's a little bit far from you. And you can keep doing that, and you get a good amount of paint onto the field. from just doing that over and over again, but the thing is, you're not going to get a lot of kills doing that, are you? And I know not every weapon has to be like the king of slaying, but with how easy it is to just jump, have all 5 of your bolts land in the same spot, and instantly detonate one unlucky squid, it makes it kind of a decision that you have to make every time you're charged. Do I go for a kill, or do I go for a little bit of paint? And because you're pulled between both of those worlds, the weapon can't get too crazy. Nautilus. I love the Nautilus. The Nautilus can paint a lot if it wants to focus on it. It has to be a little mindful of its ink tank, which is unfortunate, because it's not the only thing it has to be mindful of. It's also a weapon that prefers to be slaying to painting, so it can't just focus on painting the whole game, because it has its ink tank and its, like, roll to worry about. But that being said, when it wants to paint, the thing can paint. With good range, good ink on the floor, better than Jet Squelcher. I hate that. I hate that that's true. Poor Jet Squelcher. But it is true. And the kits are great. You can keep yourself alive before we get too far away from the main weapon. By just going into the ink and swimming away, keeping your charge. You have so many options for preventing yourself from getting caught out and just dying in the same way that a traditional Splatling might. And then you get to the kits. Point sensor is, in today's meta, not the worst thing to have. Whenever people do the funny sharking thing, it's at least good to have a weapon that can use a point sensor, but isn't bogged down by that being one of their only useful tools. And this weapon, it fits that role. Like, it can point sensor, yes, and point sensor on a Splatling isn't bad, and then it gets rain. Rain on a Splatling is incredible, because you don't want to be in the ink 24/7 on a Splatling. You want to be moving up. And you want to be standing up. So rain is great, because it lets you heal faster when you're standing in the rain. In the rain. It's really good. It's a great kit. I quite like it. And I put custom knot in the same place because a bomb, specifically a suction bomb, just does a lot for any weapon. Even if it gives you a lot of downtime. You get the instant ink tank refill that Splashdown is, and the Get Off Me tool that Splashdown is. It has a lot going for it in both kits, genuinely. And I think, like, if some parts of Splashdown were maybe a little bit more viable, you'd be seeing a lot more of it. We're going to talk about the minis and the edits at the same time, because they're so similar. In a couple different ways. They're both really paint bots, is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. They paint at fairly similar ranges, just one paints a whole lot more at a slightly shorter range under a much shorter amount of time, and the other one has a multi-second charge time to deal with whenever it wants to access its max DPS. And that's a bit of a charge time, but that max DPS, which is also your max paint per second, is seriously insane. What Edit can do when it's fully charged is almost unrivaled in this game. And I put both edits in the same spot. They probably don't deserve it, but in terms of individual weapons, I think they are in the same spot. In terms of, you know, paint output and effectiveness. The thing is, like, you're not gonna get to run the crab edit. I know, I love crab edit. It's fun, it's cool, you're never gonna get to use it. No one... You pick crab edit a game, your teammates are gonna DM you saying, hey, could you not do that next game? Could you go V edit? We want edit. We're gonna riot. Because vanilla edit just is like one of the premier cooler weapons in the game, and when a weapon is a cooler weapon and an effective paint bot, it becomes a staple of the metagame. So that's why edit is all the way up here. But I genuinely believe that with a bomb that's like a lethal bomb, the best bomb in the game, and a crab, which is one of the best specials in the game, on a weapon that can paint for its special really easily, I think it's a little overlooked, is what I'm getting at. But that being said, Curling Bomb is pretty similar. There's a lot of times where you'll see someone with the vanilla kit just throwing a curling bomb for the extra paint it'll provide. That's nice. It's nice to have. On a weapon that's constantly just filling up its special meter over and over again, that's a pretty nice thing. And that's not even to mention how strong the weapon is in terms of like protecting itself and its teammates. It's got crazy DPS. It's like you've got a gun that shoots a laser out of it, and if you keep the laser on the enemy for long enough, it's great. The paint placed through combat is sublime. It's not any different than your paint placed in fighting. I mean, than your paint placed outside of fighting. The tempo takes a little bit of a hit from the charge time, but other than that, it's like perfectly fine. The minis are very similar to the edits, is the thing, in terms of their role on a team, but the slot they can take up is often a different one. The thing is, Mini is, in all, like, metrics, a shooter. I know, it's a Splatling, yes, but it plays the way that a shooter would, but with a bit more range, and of course with the charge time. But that charge time, especially on these weapons, does not amount to much. It's like, you pull the trigger and it's already fully charged. You don't even have to, like, wait, it's just there. So, the difference between these two is the kits. I do think Zimmy is still the better weapon, just because of where Bubble is at. But this isn't about weapon, like, rank. This is about paint. And while Bubble is really good for extending your range, and your safe zone, Zimmy loves that. Zimmy makes great use of that. Vanilla gets a couple more points for the way that burst bombs can be used, and the way that Hammer is now a useful thing. We talked about how Hammer works really well on skirmisher weapons, and I do think Mini can function in that role. I've been thinking this for a long time, since before I got the Hammer buff, but it's very similar to Wiper, actually. With a bit more paint, and a slightly different sub. I think it plays very similar. I've always held it kind of fondly, if I'm being honest. I think it's a cool weapon. But the thing is, it's just not what most team comps really want. Which is a thing that Wiper can also kind of say. It paints a crazy amount. It'd make a great paint bot, and I'd love to see it on like a team that's running S-Blast or another Burst Bomb. I think it'd be quite good. But then again, if you need a Burst Bomb on a painting weapon, there's an option that beats this, and I think it's one of the reasons that we don't see this weapon used too often. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But first... okay, I'm an Explo main, so I'm a little biased, obviously. I genuinely do believe that in terms of effectiveness, Explo is #1. Granted, it might be tied for #1 with another weapon, but I think there are so many reasons for this. Its only real negatives, I mean, I guess you could say the kits, but the kits are pretty good. The negatives are that it has to charge its ink pretty often, and that it has a little bit of a low time to kill. When you're playing Explo, you are kind of putting yourself at risk a little bit. But here's the thing, like, Splashdown helps a lot with that. Wall even more so. I don't know how to say this without sounding like a condescending jerk, but like, if you're getting rushed down with Explo, you just ain't doing it right. You have to be so on the ball to be in the right position with this weapon at all times, but if you are on the ball, you will not get rushed down. And if you are getting rushed down, you will have seen it coming with enough time to have made a plan. So I don't think the negatives are all that bad outside of the ink efficiency, which is a bit of a problem. You basically have to choose between 10 shots per ink tank and 11, and the 11 takes a whole hell of a lot of ink saver. But all that aside, it's insane how much paint this thing can output. Up to 24 paint per shot. which is about 100 every 4 shots. Like, that's crazy. Am I wrong in thinking that? The only reason it doesn't see too much use is that, like, there are weapons that fit the role of backline paint support perfectly, and putting a splashdown or rainstorm on your team is not, like, it's not what you always want. But I do think the weapon is fantastic. The kits? Let's talk about the kits for a second. In terms of keeping yourself alive and having the perspective to do that, the first kit and the second kit handle that in completely different ways. The second kit handles that a little bit more actively, in that it, like, throws up a wall to prepare, or it keeps a splashdown in the pocket to defend itself if things hit the fan. But the first kit uses the point sensor to do that. And the cool thing about the point sensor Explo combo is that, like, you basically got a mortar launcher that can perfectly hit wherever it wants to on the map. Nowhere is safe. If you know exactly where someone is, 99% of the time you can put a shot there, no matter where they are. I love it for that. I love V-Explo. I think Rain is pretty good for it too. It's a good kit. It's just not quite as good as C-Explo, and I think the real difference maker that makes it all the way up here is that the sustain that Splashdown provides as a backup plan to keep you from dying to someone who has successfully rushed you down, it's good for that. It's real good for that. Albeit, you know, flawed for the same reason that Splashdown is flawed. But that's all there is to say about Explo. I could talk for hours about Explo, seriously. I might go on a big Explo ramble one day, but it is my favorite weapon. So let's move on to the pencil. So I think pencil's a little bit less in terms of paint effectiveness, but higher in terms of output. Because Explo has to, like, use its shots to get kills, is the thing. With the pencil, you don't have to do any of that. You can just paint the map for the whole round. Granted, you're not going to be using the pencil to its full potential that way, but it's still a thing that you could do. You could just paintbot with pencil and get a bunch of coolers, even after all the nerfs. It's kind of crazy that you can do that. The 68 damage shot on the right teams is insane for keeping yourself alive, and the negative paint thing we talked about earlier with keeping your enemies dead. The only issue is, like I said at the beginning, you have to use your shots to fill up the cooler. You can't always justify using them to shoot. That's the bottom line, and that's why red pen is where it is, and why blue pen is to the left of it. That being said, they still paint a crazy amount. Genuinely a crazy amount. Alright. It's time. The moment you've all been waiting for. Spray shooters. We're talking about all of them at once. Because outside of Junior, they all run into the exact same problem. The weapon furthest to the left in terms of paint effectiveness in the game is Neo Sploosh. What can Neo Sploosh do if you are outside of its range? What can it do? The answer is nothing. The answer is just nothing. And I mean, what is there to say about that? The kit does nothing for you. The weapon does nothing for you. Your best bet is to just hold W and hope that nobody catches on. It doesn't work out. Unfortunately, like, I would love to put it lower in terms of paint output, but the main gun can put out a lot of paint. I'd be like lying if I said it didn't. But the thing is, it can't put out any of that paint safely. It can't do any of the things that the other weapons that can paint do, you know? It's just Neo Sploosh. What options does it have? It can put a beacon down. That doesn't help it. It can wail. It can't combo off the whale. How's it gonna reach the enemy without getting shot at? Neo Sploosh struggles. And frankly, V Sploosh, while it is much better, it's not so much better that it's in such a good position. Curling Bomb is good for mobility, yes. It's not good for combat. And that was the struggle. Now that it has like the hammer buff, things might be a little different, but still, I don't think that's enough to change it from this position. Like, its best bet, throw a curling bomb to move in. That's something. That's an approach. That's better than Carbon had, V-Carbon in terms of approach. And it can throw the hammer. That's something as well. That's not bad. It's just, when you're not using the hammer, you don't have the hammer full, your only option is the linear curling bomb. And if your enemies are like on it, and they know what you're doing, they're not gonna fall for it. You're not gonna have a way in for the entire game. And I think the weapon that, like, struggles the most with entry, outside of Neo Sploosh, is Gold Aerospray. I could ramble for hours on how I think the Aerosprays aren't very good at all. But I'll just condense it for you. Aerospray, Gold Aerospray in particular, has one approach option. Paint a whole hell of a lot, and then throw a Booyah Bomb. It has thrown the Booyah Bomb. What is its option now? Paint, throw another Booyah Bomb. It can't very well swim into the area that it's Booyah Bombed, because the second the bomb ends, it's just gonna lose whatever fight it picks. So, what can it do? It can only paint. And throw Booyah Bomb. And Booyah Bomb is good, don't get me wrong. But Booyah Bomb without a weapon? What's even the point? Like, what's it gonna accomplish? I don't know. I don't think it can accomplish anything. It's just a really unfortunate weapon who has one option, and that's to farm for Booyah Bomb. And Booyah Bomb is not the end-all be-all option here. If you need a painting weapon, there are so many good ones. Booyah Bomb is on some of them. It's like, just pick one of those. Please. And then you have a sprinkler to get more Booyah Bombs. Am I talking in circles? Alright, let's move on. Because everything I'm saying about Aerospray, you probably already knew. It really struggles to do anything outside of farm Booyah Bomb. And frankly, vanilla Aerospray doesn't have it much better. The only reason it's all the way up here is Fizzy. I'll be honest, Fizzy gives you something to do. Because here's the thing about Aerospray. If you're gonna use the main weapon for combat, the best you can hope for is a trade. Any player that is on your skill level, or even a little bit better, you are not gonna be beating them with this weapon. Your only way to beat that kind of player is with your kit. And Booyah Bomb is really telegraphed. Sprinkler doesn't fight. Fizzy? You can spec in the double Fizzy with this thing, and you can get some stuff done. But that's not using the weapon to its strengths, that's using the sub to its strengths, and if you're just using the sub, you might as well pick the weapon that gets Booyah Bomb and Fizzy. But instead, you get a Reef Slider, for a weapon that already struggles to be very close to enemies and survive that kind of encounter. Reef Slider is notorious for putting you in that position. It can paint a lot in a quick burst, but it will be at the cost of your life, way more often than not. So yeah, the Aerosprays have such critical flaws that they never see use in any sort of competitive format, ever! You're kind of hurting yourself if you're just locking into Aerospray, and I know if you like the weapon, I don't want to tell you that it's just strictly bad. But the fact of the matter is, every other weapon that you could choose to do what you're doing is strictly better. And I know that sounds like a hard way to say that, but it's just the case. Junior is the only spray shooter left. And Junior is kind of an oddball. Junior can paint a lot. Like all the spray shooters can. Junior has a bit more range than they do for some reason, thanks to a recent buff. But that's not why you pick Junior. You pick Junior for one very specific reason, and it's the reason that it's like still so high up on both counts. Because it has a gimmick that no other weapon can do. Its ink tank is 110% of the normal ink tank size. The thing's got the big tank. You can easily spec into double bomb with either of these. And that's the play. There are weapons that will strictly lose to someone throwing a torpedo at them over and over again. Hydra, E-Leader, Explo. I know this, I'm an Explo player, it's pain. Please don't pick Custom Junior, you'll make me so sad. And not for the reasons that picking Aerospray will make me so sad. Just because I won't like fighting you with Custom Junior. It hurts. You know how difficult it is to like stop what I'm doing and aim an Explo shot at a flying torpedo? All the time? Anyways, you know my counter. But the reason that C Junior doesn't see too much use is Wavebreaker. Like, it's a weapon, it's a spray shooter. Spray shooters paint a lot. They need a reason to be painting a lot. And Torp is a good reason to pick the weapon, but Wavebreaker is not a good reason to pick a painting weapon. So, you get left with Vanilla Junior. The range is still very, very low. All of these spray shooters are putting themselves at risk when they take an engagement face to face. But luckily, for this weapon, and the Torp Spammer one, and every once in a while, the Fizzy one, but not when it uses the Reef Slider. This one doesn't even have to approach a combat situation. It can just stay away and throw bombs for the entire game, and win. It works for him. Who am I to judge? I'm glad. And the fruits of his labors are a bubble. The kit is genuinely fantastic. If you're doing a spray shooter, Junior is the gold standard. Not the gold one. Junior. Junior's really good. It really is. The only issue with the kit is, again, it's not very good for combat. So if you're looking to like fight with your main weapon, which Splatoon 3 is kind of about fighting with your main weapon, so you better be getting something serious in a trade-off for that kind of trade. Junior can't fight, but it's really good at painting. And the thing is, the only real thing that this struggles with, besides like, you know, taking 1v1s, is that it has to get into a good position where its bubble would be useful if it wants to provide a bubble to its teammate that's actually worth providing. And that can be a bit of a struggle sometimes. The kit can be a bit of a hindrance for specifically that reason. But Bubble does all the things that Bubble normally does for your entire team, and for the Junior even. And the Junior, considering it's a spray shooter, if someone rushes into the bubble, that might be the one and only time that Junior is not the worst gun in the game, because now they're at close range. Granted, you'll still be out DPS'd by every weapon in the game, but it's something. Alright, let's move on from the spray shooters. I got a little too heated there. I hate these guys. I've had way too many spray shooters on every single team, and I'm sick of it. That definitely wasn't the inspiration to make this video, I promise. Okay, maybe it was, but let's move on. Inkbrush. I actually really like Inkbrush. I think Inkbrush is really cool. I can't use it, obviously. I've got arthritis, so I can't even pick up the weapon. But when I watch people play it, I'm intrigued. It looks really interesting. Like, its game plan is just to, like, slowly work its way into frustrating positions. And then the second people look away, it destroys everything. That's really cool. I like that game plan. And the vanilla Inkbrush specs a little bit closer into what, like, Junior specs into, which is using its kit. And this is a weapon that doesn't really need much investment in terms of gear cost. So it's kind of interesting what you can do with vanilla Inkbrush or Vinkbrush, what have you. But the real draw for Inkbrush right now is Ninkbrush. That sounded so dumb. I had to say it, I'm sorry, that's just what's in my brain. Inkbrush Nouveau. This kit is honestly like kind of a direct upgrade at this point in terms of balance. But in terms of paint output, I don't really think either kit has an edge. And same with paint effectiveness. One could make the argument that Ultra Stamp is a better deterrent at melee and long range, so that might be points for effectiveness. But Ink Mine and Splat Bomb have their own fight. I think Splat Bomb is the better sub, yes, but I think Ink Mine might be a little bit more utilitous. Certain situations you would definitely rather have the Ink Mine, and given all the positions that this weapon can worm its way into, the Ink Mine's very good. The big issue with this weapon in terms of effectiveness, because you've probably heard by now that Ink Brush can output so much paint per second that it can outpaint 2 Splattershot Juniors at the same time. The thing about that is, you could say it's higher, like it breaks this list somehow, but you're not going to be painting the whole game with this weapon. You will with Junior. You will not with Ink Brush. You have a job to do. You have to distract the enemy. You have to survive. Use your movement tools to keep yourself a threat on the fringe corners of the map. Do these things. You have a job. That's the Ink Brush creed. And when you're doing your job correctly, you're just not painting all that much. Most of the time. Some of the time you have to. But that's not your goal. Your goal is to just worm your way into really frustrating positions for the enemy to deal with. Luckily, the weapon is so fast, like absurdly fast. It's got insane mobility. It can just nope out of a situation if it feels like it's at risk. Which is another point towards, like, keeping the risk minimal when playing the weapon. But it's just not painting when it's doing its job. And that's the bottom line here. Does that mean it's any lower than this on the list? No, I don't think so. I think just because of what it can do in the right situations, it needs to be where it is. But it really is an impressive weapon at the end of the day, what it can accomplish, obviously. Alright, let's move on. We got some more shooters to discuss. We're gonna do N-Zap and Shot at the same time, because in terms of paint, they're nearly identical. For the main gun, they have such similar paint patterns, with like slight tweaks in terms of movement speed, and maybe overall paint output. I could see N-Zap having slightly more paint than Shot, just in its main fire. Although, I wouldn't be surprised if they had like almost the exact same numbers at the end of the day. So the reason these weapons are in such different positions, I'll get into now. N-Zap 89. So, this weapon is probably the one I see the most in solo queue. But in comp, you see a lot more of these. And the reason should not surprise you whatsoever. If you're just looking to play the game with a shooter and you want to spam a whole bunch, but you don't want to be like kneecapped by the fact that you have no range whatsoever, N-Zap's a good pick. And if you don't want to think about what you're doing, and you just want to, like, you know, throw auto bombs, throw chumps, throw more auto bombs, paint the floor, it's not a bad kit for that. But the issue with N-Zap 89 is that it's not good for, like, anything else whatsoever. It struggles with being rushed down. It doesn't really fight at all. In fact, it kind of just stays in the back the entire game, throwing auto bombs more often than not. I don't know if that's playing the weapon correctly, because I don't know if the weapon could do anything more than that effectively. I just kind of think that it's maybe even stuck as the spray shooter that spams. And it doesn't quite have the kit that Junior does to make that a worthwhile playstyle. And then you get Vanilla Zap, which is like actually insane. It's so close, right? It's just a couple more ticks to the right. But the weapon is like top tier. And if not top tier, just below that. For obvious reasons. Cooler on a weapon that has a lot of paint output is always a good thing. And this is pretty much your only other option between these big three: pencil, edit, zap. This is the only one of those that isn't a backline, or some variation of a backline. So it ends up being your default on teams where you have a backline that isn't one of these two weapons, like Explo, or Heavy, or Ballpoint, or Hydra, or any of them really. Zap ends up being very valuable for that. Having a Suction Bomb is just fantastic, really. It's a great kit, and Cooler is a great special. The only reason it's not further to the right is because it struggles a little bit in combat. Its mobility is great, its paint is great, but it has to hit 4 really clean shots, and it doesn't shoot them all that fast. It shoots them pretty fast, but not fast enough to out DPS the weapons that are like moving in and insta-giving it. And it's definitely not really capable of fighting weapons that outrange it. So it can be a bit of a struggle paintbotting with Zap, but that doesn't mean it's a bad weapon by any means. In fact, it's really, really good. I like it. I like Zap. I just wish it were a little bit more practical in today's metagame. You don't really see it too much, which is a shame because I want to play crab at it. Let me do it, please. Okay, here's the thing about Splattershot. It can paint a lot. It has one of the quickest time to kills of any non-one-shot weapon in the game, especially up close when it's a 3-shot. It doesn't paint as much as the weapon that I've put in the top right corner of this list that I've yet to reveal that you already saw earlier in the video. And that's kind of the problem. Just because it doesn't paint as much, it kind of struggles to fit into the niche of being a paint bot, even though its kits are perfect for that. Suction Bomb Zuka, one could not ask for better tools for fighting the enemy. Splat Bomb Tri-Strike, one could not ask for better tools for controlling the match. It really is amazing for that. I mean, that is the bucket kit, to be fair. But on a weapon that can actually paint, and that makes a world of difference. It's a really good weapon. It's a great weapon. It's just, it kind of struggles a little bit with, you know, outpacing a certain other weapon in the game. Alright, let's talk about Reflux. Here's the thing. These weapons are incredible. Genuinely. There's a reason that V-Flux wins every single Turf War tournament ever run. And I could see the argument being made that they're actually both in the same spot. But I do think they're a little separate, and I'll get into why right now, but first, we gotta talk about the main weapon itself. This thing is the fastest when it comes to painting the floor, and painting it really well. I don't think it can be beat in those terms. And you combine that with the ability to do the Squiffer jump one-shot maneuver, and you get a weapon that's incredibly versatile in the right hands. In the wrong hands, it's the best paint bot in the game, you know? Like, it's a really, really good weapon for that. I genuinely considered putting this outside of the list, like an extra, like up here, an extra tier up, you know? It's that good when it comes to painting. But it does struggle with a few things. Notably, if you can't perfectly hit those Squiffer charge shots, you're gonna struggle a little bit to keep yourself alive. So it can kind of be a risk to run this thing when you're going towards the front. And simultaneously, when you are using those charge shots, you're not painting a whole lot. So its paint is really only placed in its rapid fire mode, which is, I mean, it is a downside, but it doesn't matter because this weapon can like shoot so fast and paint so fast that like, what does it even matter, you know? But then we have its kits. Here's the thing. V-Flux, you don't have to be good at the game to win with V-Flux. You don't even have to engage the enemy. You can just walk around, throwing curling, spamming missiles, the whole game. And you will be providing a lot to your team in doing so. It's kind of crazy. But D-Flux? I think deflux kind of demands a little bit of skill, and I'll tell you why. For one, if you're not using your wall actively and like shooting from behind it and hitting those shots, like, what's even the point of having the wall? Even if it's one of the best subs in the game, if you're not utilizing it, like, why do you even care about having it? And then, if you do the reef slider, you are putting yourself in one of the most vulnerable positions possible, which is in end lag and often in unsafe territory. So if you can't hit those clutch shots, the deflux might be a bit of a hindrance towards your survival. That's the bottom line here. That's why I think that like V-flux is so much higher, because A, the barrier to entry is much lower, and B, like even if you're playing it fantastically, you can hit the one-shots with other weapons, really. But only one of them brings missiles to the table, and missiles are insane. It's time. Let's talk about the Splash-O-Matic. Now, I have a reason for separating these two by two little grid things. What do you even call those? And that comes down to defensibility. N-Splash has an insane paint output, and what its kit can do to the map and the other players is kind of crazy. But if it gets rushed down, its kit does nothing to defend it. Nothing whatsoever. That being said, it's still, like, kind of insane how good the weapon is, despite that weakness. And especially if you can hit your shots, you're not going to be feeling that weakness whatsoever. Okay, maybe not whatsoever, but not as much. But there's a good reason that V-Splash is the top right of the tier list, all the way up there. Its paint output, much like N-Splash, is obscenely high. It doesn't have to charge up. It can just hold the trigger and cover the entire map in turf, in typical Splash fashion. But here's the deal. Burst Bomb. Burst Bomb contributes to negative paint. You keep your paint on the map by keeping the enemies dead. And Burst Bomb on a team that wants a Burst Bomb is incredible. This is why you do not see Mini Splatling. Vimy. This is why you do not see Vimy. Because if you want a Burst Bomb paint bot, this one has slightly more paint output, and it has a crab. Crab is insane in this game. I have yet to mention just how good it is. It can paint a bunch if you want it. It can one-shot combo a bunch if you want it. It can play off of damage of friendlies if you want it. It can do everything. It's your all-in-one special. Combining that with the best paint bot in the game, and a Burst Bomb, it really is no small wonder why it's like a top 5 weapon right now, and why it's had such a history of being just incredible in this game. Because it just brings so much to the table, and it puts it out so fast. Hell, both of these weapons put out their subs and specials at a speed that other weapons, like, they just can't match. It doesn't work. It's shooter privilege is what it is. Everyone else gets like white ink frames or other things that hold them back, and these guys are just main strafing around the map, spamming the best tools in the game like they were born to do it. It really is no small wonder why they're so high up. That's all there is to say. They're great weapons, and the best paint bots in the game, if you ask me. The only weapon to give Explo a run for its money in terms of paint effectiveness. But that being said, that's it. You now know why I think every weapon on this list belongs in the spot that I put it in. Hopefully I was able to, like, put something novel out there into the ether. Something worthwhile. But who knows, maybe this entire video was just spent regurgitating things everyone already knew. But one way or another, here we are, at the end of it. So this is one hell of a video to post as the first video on a channel. This was supposed to be like an hour-long project. I don't know what happened. But regardless, thanks for watching. If you want more from me, this is the Splatoon channel, mumph.inc. I stream every other day on Twitch at mumph. So if you want to see me streaming Splatoon, I'm doing that later today, actually. I post other things in other places, and if you want more Splatoon stuff, there will be more to come. I have several scripts. I hope I see you then. You know, take care of yourself. I'm gonna, like, jump off this boat now. See ya!